one of Earth's final frontiers, where temperatures plunge to -70 degrees Celsius and the sun disappears for months. Yet, beneath this frozen facade lies a treasure trove of unsolved mysteries that have captivated explorers, scientists, and dreamers for centuries. Welcome to Arctic Mysteries, where we journey into the heart of the world's most enigmatic frozen wilderness. Over the next 20 episodes, we'll explore vanished expeditions, ancient cultures preserved in ice, strange phenomena that defy explanation, and secrets that nature has kept locked away for millennia. The Arctic isn't just a place, it's a puzzle. Every iceberg tells a story. Every aurora holds a secret. Every frozen artifact whispers tales of human ambition and survival. Our story begins with understanding what makes the Arctic so mysterious. Unlike Antarctica, a continent surrounded by ocean, the Arctic is an ocean surrounded by continents. This Arctic Ocean, covered by shifting sea ice, has been a highway for ancient peoples, a battleground for nations, and a laboratory for understanding our planet's climate. The indigenous peoples of the Arctic, the Inuit, Sami, and others, have lived here for thousands of years. Their oral traditions speak of lights in the sky that dance and sing, and creatures beneath the ice that can capsize kayaks with a flick of their tails. When European explorers first ventured into these frozen waters in the 16th century, they sought the legendary Northwest Passage. What they found instead was a graveyard of ships, a testing ground for human endurance, and mysteries that would haunt their nations for generations. The Arctic preserves everything. In the permafrost, woolly mammoths remain so perfectly frozen that their flesh is still pink after 40,000 years. Scientists have found mammoth carcasses with their last meal still in their stomachs. Ancient viruses and bacteria sleep in the ice, waiting to be awakened. Ships lost centuries ago emerge from melting glaciers, their cargo and crew remarkably intact, frozen in time. But the Arctic also conceals with equal mastery. Beneath miles of ice lie secrets we're only beginning to discover. Massive craters that appeared overnight in Siberian tundra, their origins fiercely debated. Ancient forests buried under glaciers, preserved so perfectly the wood could still burn. Lakes that exist beneath ice sheets, cut off from the surface world for millions of years, possibly harboring life forms completely unknown to science. The magnetic North Pole wanders across the Arctic, shifting its position by dozens of kilometers each year. This movement has accelerated dramatically, raising profound questions about what's happening deep within Earth's core. In some locations, compasses spin wildly, as if the normal rules of physics don't apply. Then there are the lights. The Aurora Borealis paints the Arctic sky with curtains of green, purple, and red that ripple and dance like living things. Ancient peoples believed these were spirits, bridges to the afterlife or omens of war. The Vikings thought they were reflections from the armor of the Valkyries. The Inuit warned children not to whistle at the lights, believing they would descend and carry the child away. Even today, standing beneath an active aurora feels like witnessing something supernatural. The Arctic also experiences the most extreme light conditions on Earth. During polar night, the sun doesn't rise for months, plunging the region into continuous darkness. During polar day, the sun never sets, circling the horizon in an endless loop. These extreme conditions affect everything. Early explorers reported hallucinations, madness, and profound spiritual experiences during the long darkness. Some claim to see cities in the sky or hear voices in the wind. Modern researchers at Arctic stations have documented similar effects: depression, anxiety, and in some cases, complete psychological breakdown. Climate change is transforming the Arctic faster than anywhere else on Earth. Ice that has existed for millions of years is melting, revealing landscapes and artifacts hidden since the last ice age. This melting is solving some mysteries while creating new ones. Strange bacteria and viruses are emerging from thawing permafrost. Ancient trade routes are opening as sea ice retreats, and evidence of past climate catastrophes is coming to light, offering both warnings and insights about our planet's future. The Arctic Ocean itself holds profound mysteries. The Beaufort Gyre, a massive circular current, holds more fresh water than all the Great Lakes combined. If this gyre suddenly releases its stored water, it could plunge Europe into a new ice age within decades. Beneath the Arctic ice, scientists have discovered hydrothermal vents, underwater volcanic springs that support entire ecosystems in complete darkness. These vents harbor life forms that survive on chemical energy, not sunlight. Some scientists believe they might hold clues about how life began on Earth, or how it might exist on the ice-covered moons of Jupiter and Saturn. The seafloor is scarred with mysterious grooves, some hundreds of kilometers long. Researchers debate whether these are tracks from massive icebergs, ancient glacial movements, or geological processes that occur nowhere else on Earth. Ghost ships drift in Arctic waters, their crews vanished without a trace. They're found with meals on tables and engines running, but not a soul aboard. The Mary Celeste phenomenon repeats itself with eerie regularity in these frozen seas. The Arctic is also a region of geopolitical mystery. During the Cold War, American and Soviet submarines prowled beneath the ice cap, playing a deadly game of cat and mouse. Secret nuclear-powered listening stations were established on ice islands. Today, the race for Arctic resources has begun. Russia has planted its flag on the seafloor beneath the North Pole. They've revived abandoned Soviet bases and built new military installations. Other nations are responding with their own naval patrols and territorial claims, all driven by estimates of vast oil, gas, and mineral deposits. But perhaps the greatest mystery is what the Arctic tells us about our past and future. Ice cores drilled from glaciers contain bubbles of ancient atmosphere, tiny time capsules from hundreds of thousands of years ago. These frozen records show that dramatic climate shifts can happen in just decades. They prove that our climate is far more fragile and variable than we once believed. The Arctic is where we face our planetary future. If current trends continue, the Arctic Ocean could be completely ice-free in summer within a few decades. This would trigger accelerated sea level rise and alter weather patterns worldwide. This is where we'll spend our journey together, exploring the strange, the unexplained, and the profound mysteries that this frozen realm holds. In 1845, two state-of-the-art British naval ships, HMS Erebus and HMS Terror, sailed from England with 129 men. Their mission: to conquer the fabled Northwest Passage. They were armed with the best technology of the era, provisions for 3 years, and an unshakable belief in their own superiority. They sailed into the ice and simply vanished. Not a single man returned alive. Their commander, Sir John Franklin, was 59 years old, a veteran explorer with a rather unfortunate nickname, the man who ate his boots, earned on a previous disastrous expedition where starvation drove his party to desperation. But he was also a national hero, and the British Admiralty was eager to fund one last glorious attempt to claim the Northwest Passage for the Crown. The ships were marvels of Victorian engineering, reinforced with iron plating and fitted with revolutionary steam engines. Their holds were packed with tons of flour, pemmican, and thousands of liters of lemon juice to ward off scurvy. And most critically, they carried 8,000 tins of preserved food, enough for the entire 3-year journey. But this modern convenience held a deadly secret. The contract for the canned food had gone to the lowest bidder, a man named Stephen Goldner. Rushing to meet his deadline, Goldner used oversized cans that couldn't be heated properly to kill bacteria. Worse, the cans were sealed with lead solder. Significant amounts of lead were used to patch up shoddy work, slowly poisoning the food inside. But the crew, of course, knew nothing of this. Along with the food, they carried a library of over 1,200 books, musical instruments, fine china, and silver cutlery. They were not just exploring, they were taking Victorian England with them, confident that their culture and technology could tame the wild Arctic. The last time any European saw them was in late July 1845. Whalers in Baffin Bay reported the ships and crew in high spirits, waiting for the ice to clear. After that, nothing. Silence. As years passed, Franklin's wife, Lady Jane Franklin, refused to give up, funding one search party after another. The British government, deeply embarrassed, offered a massive reward for any information. The first clues were found in 1850 on Beechey Island, the site of their first winter camp. Searchers found 3 graves belonging to 3 young men who died in the first few months of the expedition. But why had they died so early, when supplies were plentiful and morale should have been high? The site offered no note, no clues about where they had gone next. Then, in 1854, a Scottish explorer named John Ray made a shocking discovery. He met Inuit people who possessed silverware, buttons, and other items from the expedition. They told Ray a harrowing story. Years earlier, they had seen a group of about 40 starving white men dragging a boat south over the ice. The Inuit said the men were desperate, dying, and that their leader was already dead. The hunters later found their camp and saw something that would horrify the world: evidence of cannibalism. The bones showed cut marks and were broken open to extract the marrow. When Ray's report hit the British newspapers, Victorian society was outraged. The famous author Charles Dickens led the charge, flatly denying that heroic British sailors would ever resort to such an act. He accused the Inuit of murder. Lady Franklin publicly attacked Ray's character. The public simply couldn't accept the grim reality, but the evidence was just beginning to surface. In 1859, an expedition funded by Lady Franklin herself found the key to the mystery. On King William Island, they discovered a stone cairn with a note inside. It was a standard Admiralty form with 2 messages. The first, dated May 1847, was optimistic. All well. But scrawled in the margins was a second desperate message from April 1848. It was a catastrophe. Sir John Franklin had died in June 1847. The ships had been trapped in the ice for 19 months. 24 men were already dead. The 105 survivors, led by Captains Crozier and Fitzjames, were abandoning the crushed ships to march overland towards a trading post hundreds of kilometers away. It was a death march. Nearby, the search party found a boat on a sledge. Inside were 2 skeletons and a bizarre collection of belongings. There was chocolate and tea, but also silk handkerchiefs, scented soap, slippers, fine books, and silver plates. The men were dragging useless luxuries across the desolate ice. This wasn't just poor planning, it was madness, and it pointed to a single culprit: severe lead poisoning. The canned food had been slowly driving them insane, causing confusion, paranoia, and fatally poor judgment. Why else would they haul silver plates instead of food or ammunition? In the 1980s, scientists exhumed the 3 bodies from the graves on Beachy Island. The permafrost had preserved them perfectly. Analysis of their hair and bones revealed shocking levels of lead, in one case more than 200 times the normal amount. The lead came from the solder in the tins, but also from the ship's water systems and even the paint. But lead wasn't the only killer. Scurvy was also rampant. Despite having thousands of liters of lemon juice, something went wrong. Perhaps the juice spoiled, or the lead-addled officers failed to distribute it properly. Scurvy is a horrific disease. Old wounds reopen, gums bleed, teeth fall out, and it causes severe depression and paranoia. Imagine the hell these men endured. A devastating cocktail of lead poisoning, scurvy, starvation, and extreme cold. They were weak, confused, in constant pain and losing their minds. Their bodies were failing, their immune systems were shot, and their social order was collapsing. It was in this state of absolute desperation that they resorted to the last unthinkable taboo. For over a century and a half, one piece of the puzzle remained missing: the ships themselves. Then, in 2014 and 2016, marine archaeologists made the discovery of a lifetime. Both HMS Erebus and HMS Terror were found, sitting upright and remarkably preserved on the Arctic seafloor, silent witnesses to a tragedy, now finally ready to tell the rest of their story. Picture this: September 7th, 2014. A remotely operated underwater vehicle is scanning the vast empty seafloor of the Arctic. Suddenly, an unusual shape appears on the screen. As the camera zooms in, the image sharpens into something incredible: the unmistakable outline of a ship sitting upright on the bottom. After more than 160 years, HMS Erebus had been found. This discovery sent shockwaves around the world. Here was one of Sir John Franklin's legendary lost ships, remarkably preserved in the frigid waters. But its location was a complete surprise. It was found in just 11 meters of water in a place called Wilmot and Crampton Bay, miles south of where the official note said the ships had been abandoned. This meant someone had sailed or drifted aboard Erebus long after April 1848. Who was on board? How long did they survive? And why did they head south, away from the others who were trying to walk to safety? The video footage was stunning. The ship's wooden hull was mostly intact, though its masts had snapped and fallen. Artifacts were scattered all around: ceramic plates bearing the ship's crest, glass bottles, even a cannon. The cold, oxygen-poor water had created a time capsule. Inside the wreck, cabins were still recognizable, with furniture and personal items frozen in time. Then, 2 years later, on September 3rd, 2016, came an even bigger bombshell. HMS Terror was found, and it was in pristine condition, sitting upright in the aptly named Terror Bay. It rested in deeper water, which protected it from the grinding ice that had damaged Erebus. The ship looked so complete, it was as if it could be refloated and sail again tomorrow. The underwater video from Terror was haunting. Cabin doors stood open. The ship's wheel was still in place. Wine bottles sat on shelves, as if waiting for a dinner that never happened. But the most chilling detail was that all the ship's hatches were closed and secured from the inside. Someone had sealed the vessel from within, as if preparing to ride out a storm or spend the winter. This suggested that crew members had returned to the ship and deliberately locked themselves inside. But why? The discovery of both ships was a powerful validation of Inuit oral history. For generations, Inuit communities had passed down stories of their ancestors finding the ships, seeing bodies on board, and salvaging useful items. For just as long, Western historians had largely dismissed these accounts, treating them as myths or confused memories. But the Inuit were right all along. The ships were exactly where their oral traditions said they would be. An Inuit elder named Louis Kamukak, who passed away in 2018, had spent his life collecting these stories. He always insisted the ships had moved far south of their last known position. He interviewed elders who shared stories passed down from their grandparents about encountering the white men's ships. These accounts pointed searchers in the right direction, even when Western science was slow to trust them. One particularly vivid Inuit story described hunters finding a ship with dead men still aboard, some in their bunks, some on the deck, some frozen in the rigging. The hunters took what they needed, like knives and wood, but left, feeling the ship was cursed. When they returned the next year for more supplies, the ship was gone, likely sunk. This account, once dismissed as a legend, now seems to be a real, first-hand description of what happened to one of the Franklin ships. So why would a few men stay with the ships? Maybe they were too sick to join the desperate march overland. Maybe they were officers who went back for important documents. Or maybe, realizing the trek was hopeless, they struggled back to the ships for shelter, a final refuge to wait for the end. Today, Parks Canada archaeologists are meticulously studying the wrecks. The diving season is short and the work is dangerous, but what they're finding is extraordinary. Officers' cabins still have bed frames and desks. The galley kitchen has cooking equipment still in place. Personal items are scattered everywhere. Buttons, tools, and fragments of clothing, each telling a small part of a huge story. One of the most poignant discoveries was the ship's bell from Erebus, engraved with its name and launch date. That bell marked the daily life of the ship, and it likely told for the burials of the men who never came home. But finding the ships has only created more questions. If men sailed Erebus south, where are their bodies? Were they buried at sea, or are they still inside unexplored parts of the hull? And what about Terror's sealed hatches? If the ship was sinking, why was someone busy locking it up? The more we learn, the more complex the story becomes. Evidence from the surrounding land paints a grim picture. Over 100 Franklin expedition campsites have been found, littered with abandoned equipment and human remains. The bones confirm what the Inuit had always said, and what Victorian England couldn't bear to hear. The crew had resorted to cannibalism to survive. Cut marks on the bones show that this wasn't madness. It was a methodical, desperate attempt to live just a little longer. Every new find adds a piece to the puzzle. A toothbrush dropped on an island, an officer's epaulette recovered from the wreck. But the most important discovery wasn't an artifact. It was the proof that Inuit oral history, passed down through generations, held the key to this mystery all along. Western science finally caught up to indigenous knowledge. The Franklin expedition was a catastrophic failure, a brutal lesson that technology and supplies are no match for the power of the Arctic. It showed that local knowledge was the key to survival. The Inuit thrived where the best-equipped expedition of the time perished. Ironically, climate change is now opening the Northwest Passage that Franklin desperately searched for. He and his men sailed during an unusually cold period. Had they tried just a few decades earlier or later, their luck might have been completely different. The story of the Franklin expedition is still the Arctic's greatest mystery. We know where the ships are, but so many questions remain. How long did the last survivors hold on? Are the ship's logbooks hidden somewhere on King William Island waiting to be discovered? And what horrors did those men face in their final days, knowing rescue would never come? The Arctic holds its secrets tight, but bit by bit, one artifact at a time, it's slowly revealing the truth. "33 years after the Franklin expedition vanished, another group of men disappeared into the Arctic. Their goal was just as ambitious, their planning just as flawed. But this time, it wasn't about ships. This was about something audacious, something that sounded completely mad. A Swedish explorer named S.A. Andre was going to reach the North Pole by hydrogen balloon. He planned to drift over the ice in a wicker basket, suspended beneath a silk envelope filled with explosive gas. Salomon Auguste Andre was an engineer, a scientist, and a dreamer. In the 1890s, he became obsessed with ballooning. He convinced himself he could invent a way to steer a hydrogen balloon by dragging ropes across the ice. He believed this drag rope system would let him tack like a sailboat, navigating the winds instead of just drifting aimlessly. In 1896, he tried his first launch from Svalbard, but bad weather stopped him. He went back to Sweden, tweaked his balloon, and raised more money. The Swedish public was absolutely captivated. King Oscar II personally donated to the expedition. Newspapers followed every move. Andre became a national hero before he'd even taken off. On July 11, 1897, Andre tried again. His balloon, the Örnen, or the Eagle, was filled with hydrogen and packed for a 30-day journey. With him were Knut Frankel, a young engineer, and Niels Strindberg, a physics student. Strindberg was engaged to be married and brought photos of his fiancée Anna to keep him company. The launch was rushed. The wind wasn't right, but Andre was afraid of missing his chance. As the balloon lifted off, a disaster happened. Some of the all-important steering ropes snagged, detached, and were left behind on the ground. The one piece of technology that was supposed to make this whole thing possible was gone. The Eagle rose into the Arctic sky, its steering system crippled, carrying 3 men who had never been to the Arctic, had no survival training, and were betting their lives on a theory that had just failed at the starting line. The world held its breath. Ships were stationed to watch for carrier pigeons that Andre planned to release with updates. One pigeon was found. It carried a short message. They'd been flying for 7 hours and had reached 82 degrees north. And then silence. No more pigeons, no more messages. The Eagle and its crew vanished as completely as Franklin's ships had. Searches were launched. Ships scoured the seas. Expeditions explored remote islands. Years went by. Andre's mother died, still believing her son would come home. Strindberg's fiancée Anna waited for years before finally accepting her love was gone. The balloon had simply disappeared. Then, on August 6, 1930, 33 years later, a Norwegian science expedition landed on White Island, a remote, ice-covered rock in the Svalbard archipelago. What they found there was extraordinary. It was the final camp of the Andre expedition. The Arctic cold had preserved it almost perfectly. They found human remains, equipment, clothing, scientific tools, weapons, food, and most incredibly, the expedition's journals and cameras. The photographic film was still inside. The journals told their story, and the photos miraculously were still developable. What emerged from this discovery was a tale that was both inspiring and absolutely heartbreaking. The Eagle had only stayed in the air for 65 hours. Ice had built up on the silk balloon, weighing it down until it crashed onto the pack ice about 300 kilometers north of land. The crash itself wasn't catastrophic. All three men survived uninjured. They salvaged their supplies, their equipment, and their scientific instruments. Stranded on drifting ice, hundreds of kilometers from anywhere, they made a fateful decision. They would walk to safety. They built sledges, loaded them up, and began the brutal work of hauling them across the broken, shifting ice. The photos from this time are shocking. They show the men in surprisingly good spirits, posing by the crashed balloon, standing on ice floes, almost looking cheerful despite their desperate situation. But the Arctic had other plans. The ice they were walking on wasn't drifting toward land as they'd hoped. It was drifting in circles, sometimes even taking them back north. They walked for weeks, covering dozens of kilometers, only to find they'd made almost no progress. The drift of the ice was erasing all their hard work. Exhaustion and frustration began to set in. Their journals described the daily grind, breaking camp, hauling heavy sledges for hours over ridges of ice, setting up camp again, melting ice for water, and eating their dwindling rations. They hunted polar bears and seals when they could. On the surface, they were doing everything right. They were following sound survival procedures. But beneath that disciplined routine, disaster was brewing. In October 1897, after nearly 3 months on the ice, they finally reached White Island. It wasn't where they wanted to go, but it was solid ground. They were exhausted beyond belief. They set up a camp, built a small shelter from rocks and canvas, and prepared to wait for rescue. And this is where the journal entries get strange. They become terse, brief, and emotionally flat. Strindberg died first on October 5th. The journal just says he became ill and died quickly. The entry is oddly clinical, almost like a bureaucratic report. 2 healthy young men had just watched their friend die mysteriously, and they wrote about it with almost no emotion. Andre and Frankel survived for a few more weeks. They kept writing in the journal, describing their daily tasks, organizing supplies, maintaining equipment. But the entries get shorter and stranger. The very last entry, written by Andre, is incomplete. The sentence just stops mid-word, as if the writer suddenly lost the ability or the will to continue. When the scientists found the camp in 1930, they found plenty of supplies. The men had food, fuel, and ammunition. They weren't starving. They had a decent shelter and warm clothes. So why did all 3 of them die within weeks of reaching land? The most common theory is trichinosis. Analysis of polar bear meat found at the camp showed it was infected with a parasite. Eating undercooked, infected meat can cause fever, severe weakness, and eventually heart and respiratory failure. But that doesn't explain everything. Why did they die weeks apart instead of all at once? Why were the journal entries so flat and emotionless? And why did André stop writing mid-sentence? Other theories have been proposed. Carbon monoxide poisoning from their stove in a poorly ventilated shelter could explain the sequential deaths and the confusion. Or maybe it was just the crushing psychological toll. Perhaps after everything they'd been through, they simply gave up. When their remains were returned to Sweden, they were given a state funeral. They were hailed as national heroes. But were they heroes or victims of their own arrogance? André had attempted one of the world's most dangerous journeys with unproven technology and no experience. He rushed the launch, lost his most important equipment, and gambled with the lives of two men who trusted him completely. His story is a classic Arctic tragedy, technological optimism completely overwhelming practical wisdom. But there's another, more haunting layer to this story. Remember Niels Strindberg, the young physicist? He was deeply in love with his fiancée, Anna. She had begged him not to go, having a premonition of disaster. During his months on the ice, Strindberg kept a separate journal, a series of unsent letters to her. These letters, found at the camp, are filled with longing for home and love for Anna. They grow more and more aware that he might not survive. When Strindberg died, André buried him with Anna's photograph. When the bodies were found 33 years later, that photo was still there, weathered but recognizable, buried with the man who had loved her. The André expedition shattered the illusion that technology alone could conquer the Arctic. It proved that the unforgiving North demands respect, preparation, and knowledge that André and his men simply didn't have. Today, climate change is melting the very ice that doomed them. Their tragic journey across the pack ice might soon be impossible for a different reason. The photos from their camera remain some of the most haunting images in the history of exploration. They show us the faces of doomed men who didn't know they were doomed, a chilling reminder that the Arctic respects neither ambition nor technology, only skill, respect, and sometimes simple luck. Imagine a map of the Arctic Ocean. Now picture it haunted by ghosts, not of people but of entire islands, places discovered, named, and even claimed by credible explorers, only to vanish into thin air when the next expedition came looking. These weren't just simple mapping mistakes. Many of these phantom islands were seen multiple times, described in detail, and confidently drawn on official charts for decades, even centuries. So, where did they all go? Let's start with Crockerland, maybe the most famous ghost island in Arctic history. In 1906, the American explorer Robert Peary, the same man who controversially claimed to be the first to reach the North Pole, reported seeing a huge landmass northwest of Ellesmere Island. He described it vividly with hills, valleys, and snow-capped peaks. He named it Crocker Land after one of his financial backers and put it on the map. Peary's reputation was huge, so his claim was taken seriously. In 1913, the American Museum of Natural History funded a major expedition led by Donald Macmillan just to explore Crocker Land. Macmillan's team sailed to the exact coordinates Peary had given and found nothing, just a vast expanse of open water and sea ice. But here's where it gets weird. As they searched, multiple members of Macmillan's crew, including Macmillan himself, swore they could see Crocker Land on the horizon. a whole mountain range clear as day. They chased this phantom land for days across the ice, but it was like a mirage, always retreating, always just out of reach. Eventually, Macmillan figured it out. They were witnessing a Fata Morgana, a complex illusion caused by layers of cold and warm air bending light rays. It created a perfect, detailed image of land where none existed. This begs a serious question. Did Peary see the same mirage and make an honest mistake, or did he just make it all up? Many historians already doubt Peary's claim of reaching the North Pole, suggesting he faked his records. If he lied about the pole, maybe Crocoland was just another convenient fiction to bolster his reputation. But Macmillan's expedition saw more than just a phantom island. They reported bizarre optical tricks, multiple suns in the sky, islands flipping upside down and hovering above the horizon, and distances that seemed to stretch and shrink before their eyes. The Arctic atmosphere, they learned, was a powerful illusionist capable of fooling even the most experienced explorers. Then there's Sannikov Land, an even more tantalizing mystery from the Russian Arctic. In 1811, an experienced hunter named Yakov Sannikov reported seeing a large mountainous land north of the New Siberian Islands. He was adamant it wasn't a mirage. Over the next century, other explorers reported seeing it too from different locations. This mystery captivated Baron Eduard Toll, a geologist who became obsessed with finding Sannikov Land. He imagined it as a lost Arctic paradise, warmed by volcanoes, teeming with unique life. In 1900, he launched his expedition. 2 years later, after claiming to have finally spotted Sannikov Land himself, Toll and 3 companions left their ship and set off across the ice to reach it. They were never seen again. A rescue party found their last campsite, but Toll and his men had vanished, likely dying in search of a land that wasn't there. So what were all these people seeing? Were they all fooled by mirages? One theory is that Sannikov Land was a massive ice island, a giant chunk of ice shelf, hundreds of square kilometers in size, that broke off and drifted in the Arctic Ocean. These things are real. During World War II, the US military found one named T3 that was bigger than many actual islands. From a distance, covered in snow, it could easily be mistaken for land. It's possible Sannikov Land was a real floating ice island that multiple people saw over the years before it eventually melted away. The idea of phantom islands isn't just an Arctic phenomenon. For centuries, maps of the Atlantic showed a mythical island called High Brazil, west of Ireland. Legends described it as a paradise with an advanced civilization which appeared only once every 7 years. Expeditions were launched, and some sailors even claimed to have landed there. This legend fueled the imagination of Arctic explorers who hoped to find similar enchanted lands at the top of the world. And why not? The Arctic was a total unknown. People believed in an open polar sea, a patch of ice-free water at the pole. If that could exist, why not lush, volcanic islands? And sometimes geography really is temporary. In 1831, a volcanic island suddenly emerged from the Mediterranean Sea. It was about 4 kilometers around and over 60 meters high. Italy, France, Spain, and Britain all raced to claim it. Scientists visited, studied it, and gave it several names. But by the next year it was gone, eroded away by the waves. If that can happen in the calm Mediterranean, what about the chaotic Arctic? We now know there are active underwater volcanoes beneath the Arctic ice. It's possible they could create temporary islands of rock or ice that appear and disappear. Perhaps the wildest piece of phantom geography was the polar opening. In the 19th century, a respected scientist named John Cleves Sims proposed that the Earth was hollow, with massive holes at both the north and south poles leading to an interior world. It sounds crazy now, but back then it seemed like a plausible explanation for things like the auroras or why some birds fly north for the winter. Expeditions were actually launched, partly motivated by this hollow Earth theory. When they found nothing but ice, believers just claimed the opening must be a little farther north, hidden by fog. The persistence of these phantom lands tells us something important about exploration. The Arctic was a blank canvas, and explorers projected their own hopes, ambitions, and fantasies onto it. The maps filled with ghost islands were a reflection of the human desire to believe that something amazing was waiting to be discovered in the ice. Today, satellites and GPS have mapped almost every inch of our planet. The age of phantom islands is over, or is it? Climate change is making Arctic geography fluid once again. As glaciers melt, islands that were buried under ice for millennia are now appearing. At the same time, coastlines are eroding and islands are literally disappearing into the rising sea. In 2021, researchers found what they thought was the world's northernmost island off Greenland, only to realize it might just be a temporary pile of gravel pushed up by storms, appearing and disappearing with the weather. The map of the Arctic is becoming uncertain again, alive and changing, just like it was for those early explorers. The story of Phantom Islands is a powerful reminder that seeing isn't always believing. Our senses can be fooled, especially in extreme environments. It shows that even our most scientific maps are human creations, full of potential errors and biases. It teaches us a lesson in humility, that sometimes the ground beneath our feet and the facts we hold to be true might not be as solid as we think. There's nothing quite like the Arctic to make you feel like you've stepped into another world, and the ultimate symbol of this otherworldly nature. The Aurora Borealis. Imagine curtains of green, purple, and red light dancing and rippling across the endless night sky. For thousands of years, these lights have sparked myths, terror, and pure wonder. Today we know what causes them: charged particles from the sun smashing into gases in our upper atmosphere. But trust me, knowing the science doesn't make it any less magical. Standing under an active aurora feels like you're witnessing something that just shouldn't exist in our rational world. The northern lights are most common in a ring around the magnetic North Pole, covering places like northern Alaska, Canada, Greenland, Iceland, and Scandinavia. In this auroral zone, you can see them on most clear, dark nights. Outside this zone, you'd need a major geomagnetic storm to get a peek. For the indigenous peoples of the Arctic, these lights were deeply woven into their culture. The Inuit of Canada and Greenland believed the auroras were the spirits of the dead playing a game of football with a walrus skull. They'd warn their children not to whistle or wave at the lights, fearing the spirits might swoop down and carry them away. Others saw the lights as torches, guiding the recently departed to the afterlife. The Sami people of Scandinavia had their own tales. Some believed the lights were the energy of departed souls. A more whimsical story tells of a magical fox sprinting across the snow, its tail brushing the sky and creating fiery sparks. In fact, the Finnish word for aurora, revontulet, literally means foxfires. The Sami also had a rule: never disrespect the aurora. Whistling or singing at it was said to bring misfortune. Now you might think these are just old stories, but here's where it gets fascinating. For centuries, people reported hearing crackling and hissing sounds during intense auroral displays. For just as long, scientists dismissed these claims. They argued that sound couldn't travel from 100 kilometers up in the atmosphere fast enough to sync with the lights. But the stories were true. In 2012, a researcher in Finland finally cracked the code. It turns out strong auroras create powerful electrical currents in the atmosphere. These currents can cause small electrical discharges from things on the ground, like trees, buildings, or even your own hair. That's what makes the crackling sound. The sound isn't coming from the aurora itself, but from its electrical effects right there beside you. So, the indigenous observers were right all along. Their ancient knowledge, passed down through generations, was accurate science that took the Western world centuries to confirm. The aurora's influence doesn't stop with sound. Reindeer herders have always known that their animals get agitated and nervous during strong auroras, and science backs this up. Reindeer might be sensing magnetic field fluctuations that are completely invisible to us. Migrating birds can also get thrown off course. Many use Earth's magnetic field to navigate, and a powerful aurora can scramble that internal compass, causing entire flocks to get lost. And what about us? Our technology is incredibly vulnerable. Back in 1859, a massive solar storm called the Carrington event lit up the sky with auroras seen as far south as Cuba. Telegraph systems went haywire, operators got electric shocks, and some telegraph offices even caught fire. If a storm of that magnitude hit us today, the consequences would be catastrophic. We're talking trillions of dollars in damage, satellites fried, power grids collapsing across continents, GPS, internet, communication networks, all could go down. And we're overdue for one. We narrowly missed a Carrington-level event in 2012. A massive solar flare crossed Earth's orbit just 1 week after we had passed that spot. It was a terrifyingly close call. But auroras are just the beginning of the Arctic's strangeness. The air itself plays tricks on your eyes. Tiny ice crystals suspended in the cold air, called diamond dust, can create stunning optical illusions like halos, sundogs, and light pillars. Sundogs, or parhelia, make it look like there are 2 extra suns, one on each side of the real one. Early explorers who saw this thought they were witnessing a supernatural omen. Light pillars are vertical columns of light shooting up from streetlights or even car headlights, turning a simple town into a forest of ethereal beams. Then there's the most mind-bending illusion of all, the Novaya Zemlya effect. This is an extreme form of atmospheric refraction that can make the sun appear above the horizon when, geometrically, it should have already set. Imagine seeing the sun for days after it was supposed to have disappeared for the winter. It's like the laws of physics are being rewritten right before your eyes. The Arctic's mysteries extend to sound as well. The extreme cold can create atmospheric channels that carry voices for kilometers across the ice, making a conversation from a mile away sound like it's happening right next to you. Explorers also reported hearing ice voices, strange, musical, or voice-like sounds coming from the ice itself. Once dismissed as hallucinations, we now know that cracking and shifting ice can produce sounds that are eerily human. And let's not forget the zones where technology just fails. The North Magnetic Pole's wanderings make compasses unreliable, but there are also reports of stranger phenomena. altimeters giving false readings, radio signals vanishing, and even mechanical watches stopping for no clear reason. The Arctic is a place of anomalies, a region that constantly challenges our understanding. In the end, the aurora remains the Arctic's most potent symbol. It's a breathtaking spectacle, a visual reminder of the cosmic forces that shape our world. Standing beneath it, you feel a sense of awe that is both beautiful and terrifying. It shows us how small we are and how our entire civilization rests on a delicate balance we can't control. The Arctic sky doesn't give up its secrets easily, but for those who are patient enough to watch, creatures here navigate total darkness, survive impossible temperatures, and live beneath meters of solid ice. The Arctic's known wildlife is incredible, but what about the unknown? The region is filled with biological mysteries, with creatures that defy our understanding of life itself. Let's start with the king of the north, the polar bear. We think we know this animal, but it holds deep secrets. Polar bears can go months without food, living off fat reserves while somehow keeping their muscles from wasting away. If a human tried that, our organs would fail. Scientists are studying this incredible ability, hoping it could lead to breakthroughs in treating human muscle-wasting diseases. And then there's their navigation. These bears travel hundreds of kilometers in straight lines across a featureless, icy desert, even in total darkness or blinding blizzards. They arrive at precise locations they haven't seen in years. How? Do they have a magnetic sense? Do they navigate by the stars? We just don't know for sure. Inuit oral tradition also speaks of giant polar bears, far larger than any officially recorded. The biggest confirmed polar bear was about 1,000 kilograms, but hunters, people who know these animals intimately, consistently report encounters with bears that seem impossibly huge, maybe 1,500 kilograms or more. Are these just stories born of fear? Or could there be true giants roaming the ice, outliers far beyond what science has documented? Now, let's dive beneath the ice, into the world of the bowhead whale. These are the longest-lived mammals on Earth. How do we know? Because hunters have found ancient harpoon points, designs not used since the 1800s, embedded in the blubber of whales they've caught. This means some of these animals are well over a century old. Scientific analysis of their eye tissue suggests some may live past 200 years. Think about that. A whale swimming in the Arctic today could have been born before the American Revolution. How do they live so long? How do they avoid cancer and the effects of aging that limit all other mammals? Cracking their secrets could change everything we know about human longevity. These whales are also powerful. They can smash through a foot of ice with their massive skulls and communicate with complex, evolving songs that travel hundreds of kilometers through the cold, dark water. It's a form of culture passed down through generations, and we are only just beginning to listen in. But the Arctic has even stranger inhabitants. Meet the Greenland shark. This creature is a living relic, possibly the longest-lived vertebrate on the planet, potentially reaching 400 years old. A shark alive today could have been swimming when Galileo first pointed a telescope at the stars. And here's the twist. Most Greenland sharks are nearly blind. A parasite latches onto their eyes, leaving them with clouded vision. So how does a blind shark hunt seals in the dark? It is thought they use an incredible sense of smell and the ability to detect the faint electrical fields given off by their prey S muscles. These sharks are also toxic. Their fresh meat contains a compound that causes an effect like extreme drunkenness. Icelanders found a way around this, burying the meat to ferment for months, creating a dish called hakal, famous for being one of the world's most challenging foods. And what about the unicorn of the sea, the narwhal? Its famous tusk, which can grow up to 3 meters long, isn't a horn at all. It's a tooth, packed with millions of nerve endings. For centuries, its purpose was a complete mystery. Now we believe it's a highly sensitive sensory organ. The tusk can detect tiny changes in water temperature, pressure, and even saltiness, giving the narwhal a detailed picture of its underwater world. Some theories suggest they can even use it to stun fish with focused bursts of sound. Evolution doesn't create a 3-meter-long sensory probe by accident. There are still secrets locked away in that incredible tooth. The Arctic's mysteries aren't limited to the animals we can see. They extend to the very edges of our world. The Arctic tern holds the record for the longest migration on Earth. Every year, it flies from the Arctic all the way to Antarctica and back again. That's a round trip of about 70 to 80,000 kilometers. Over its 30-year lifespan, a single tern might fly the equivalent of going to the moon and back 3 times. How does this tiny bird navigate with such precision across entire oceans, returning to the exact same nesting spot year after year? They use a combination of the Earth's magnetic field, the stars, the sun, and possibly even smell, a multi-sensory GPS that we can only dream of replicating. Beyond these known wonders, there are legends. Indigenous traditions speak of creatures that science has never catalogued. The Tijeruk from Inuit folklore is described as a massive serpent-like creature with a seal-like head that can move on both land and water. Is it pure myth or a distorted memory of a real animal, now rare or extinct? Then there's the Aklut, a terrifying wolf-orca hybrid that hunts on land as a wolf and in the sea as an orca. Folklorists see it as a symbol, but could it be based on a real observation? Perhaps ancient hunters saw orcas hunting near the ice edge, a behavior we've only recently documented, and saw wolf tracks nearby, merging the two into one legendary predator. Indigenous knowledge often holds truths that science later rediscovers. The deepest parts of the Arctic Ocean are one of the last unexplored frontiers on Earth. Reaching depths of over 5,000 meters, these basins are cold, dark, and under immense pressure. We used to think they were lifeless. We were wrong. Deep-sea expeditions have found stunning ecosystems. There are vast gardens of ancient sponges, forests of soft corals, and bizarre fish and invertebrates found nowhere else on the planet. Directly beneath the North Pole, a place that should be a biological desert, scientists found sea anemones and other life thriving. How? Where do they get their food in permanent darkness? Some answers lie at hydrothermal vents, underwater volcanic springs that spew out chemical energy. Here, life doesn't need the sun. Bacteria form the base of a food web that runs on chemistry, supporting unique species of shrimp, snails, and tube worms. These ecosystems might be our best model for how life could exist on other worlds, like the icy moons of Jupiter and Saturn. Today, the Arctic is changing faster than any other place on Earth. As the ice melts, southern species are moving north. Orcas are pushing deeper into Arctic territory, preying on animals that never evolved a defense against them. Some species, like ringed seals and polar bears, are facing starvation as the ice they depend on vanishes. But life is also adapting. We're seeing evolution happen in real time. Bears are changing their diets, whales are altering their migrations, and fish are genetically adapting to warmer waters. The Arctic's greatest biological mystery may be its resilience. Life has survived here through ice ages and mass extinctions. Life will continue. The question is, what will it look like, and what part will we play in its future? The secrets of the frozen deep are still waiting to be discovered. The Arctic is a land of breathtaking beauty and brutal extremes. For thousands of years, humans have dared to build lives here, carving out communities in a world of ice and snow. But the Arctic has a dark secret. It has a habit of swallowing civilizations whole. Time and again, settlements that thrived for generations have simply vanished, leaving behind only ruins and riddles. Let's travel back in time to about 500 BCE. A people known as the Dorset culture flourished across the North American Arctic. For 2,000 years, they were the masters of this icy realm. They were specialized hunters, perfectly adapted to the harsh conditions, with sophisticated tools for hunting seals, walruses, and even whales. They left behind beautiful, intricate art carved from ivory and bone, a testament to a rich culture that thrived where survival itself seems impossible. And then, around the year 1500, they were gone. Not gradually, but rapidly and completely. From Greenland to Alaska, their settlements were suddenly abandoned. There are no signs of war, no evidence of a slow decline. The Dorset people, a culture that had endured for 2 millennia, simply ceased to exist. What could cause an entire people to disappear? The leading theory involves a perfect storm of climate change and competition. Around 1000 CE, the planet entered the medieval warm period. The Arctic warmed, ice conditions changed, and animal migration patterns shifted. At the same time, a new people, the Thule, ancestors of the modern Inuit, began expanding eastward from Alaska. The Thule brought with them superior technology, larger boats, more efficient harpoons, and the game-changing innovation of dog sleds. They were more aggressive, better adapted to hunting in the newly opening waters. Inuit oral traditions remember the Dorset, calling them the Tunit, a race of gentle giants who were strong but shy and ultimately unable to compete. But simple competition doesn't explain the sheer totality of their disappearance. Usually when cultures meet, they mix. We find hybrid technologies, mixed settlements, a genetic legacy. With the Dorset, there's almost nothing. It's as if they were erased. This hints at something more catastrophic, perhaps a new disease brought by the Thule, for which the Dorset had no immunity, or a sudden environmental disaster that pushed their society past the breaking point. We just don't know. The mystery of the Dorset is ancient, but others are shockingly recent. Around 985 CE, Viking explorers led by Eric the Red colonized Greenland. For nearly 500 years, these Norse settlements thrived. At their peak, several thousand people lived there, raising cattle and sheep on dozens of farms. They built stone churches, traded walrus ivory and polar bear skins with Europe, and maintained a connection to their homelands in Iceland and Norway. Then, in the 15th century, the connection was lost. When ships from Europe finally returned decades later, they found a ghost colony. Farms were abandoned, churches stood empty, and the people were gone. Some sites looked like they were left in a hurry, tools left where they lay, doors swinging in the wind. What happened to the Norse Greenlanders? Again, climate change likely played a role. The Little Ice Age brought colder temperatures, making farming nearly impossible. The Black Death was raging in Europe, severing the vital trade routes the colony depended on for iron and grain. And conflict with the expanding Inuit could have added pressure. But there are clues that point to something more sudden. Archaeologists found a mass grave from the colony's final years. Men, women, and children, all showing signs of malnutrition, buried together in the middle of winter, a time when the ground should have been frozen solid. What desperate crisis would force them to dig graves in the permafrost? Skeletons from other sites show bone deformities and dental problems, telltale signs of starvation. Perhaps it was a cascade of disasters, crop failures, disease, and starvation all at once. But if thousands of people died, where are all the bodies? We've found far fewer graves than we'd expect. Did they try to sail back to Iceland in desperation, only to be lost at sea? Did some join Inuit communities, leaving little trace behind? The fate of the Greenland Vikings remains one of the Arctic's most haunting questions. And the pattern continues. The Pomors, hardy Russian settlers, established trading posts along the Arctic coasts from the 14th to the 19th centuries. They lived year-round in places where winter temperatures plunged to -40. Many of their settlements were also abandoned suddenly, with food stores and tools left behind. The likely culprit? Epidemics. In these isolated outposts, with no medical care and no escape, a single illness like smallpox or typhus could have been a death sentence for the entire community. One Pomor story is particularly chilling. In 1743, 4 shipwrecked sailors survived for 6 years on Svalbard. Their journals describe not just the physical hardship, but a terrifying psychological breakdown. During the months of polar night, they reported being stalked by something in the darkness, seeing strange lights and hearing voices on the wind. Was it just hallucinations brought on by isolation and sensory deprivation? Maybe. But early polar explorers frequently reported the same things, a feeling of being watched, a presence in the vast emptiness. The Arctic winter doesn't just attack the body, it attacks the mind. Think of Smeerenberg or Blubbertown, a 17th century Dutch whaling station on Svalbard. History says it was a seasonal camp for thousands of whalers, but the ruins tell a different story. They show permanent buildings and extensive cemeteries, suggesting people lived there year-round. Who were these people who chose to stay through the brutal Arctic winter, and why? The hundreds of graves are silent, their identities lost to time. Even stranger is the mystery of a place that never existed. In 1903, a Russian expedition on Franz Josef Land found a camp with supplies and an Italian journal from 1897. The journal seemed to belong to the lost André Polar expedition, but the camp was thousands of kilometers off André's known route. How did it get there? When a later expedition went to find the camp, it had vanished. Was it a hoax? A bizarre mistake? We'll never know. These aren't just stories from the distant past. The Soviet era saw entire Arctic towns abandoned, sometimes overnight. Officially, it was for economic reasons, but rumors persist of darker causes: contamination from nuclear testing, secret military incidents, or disease outbreaks that required forced, rapid evacuations. The town of Pyramiden on Svalbard is a perfect example. A Soviet mining town abandoned in 1998, it's now a ghost city frozen in time. Books still sit on library shelves. A grand piano waits in the cultural center. and Soviet propaganda posters fade on the walls. Walking through Pyramiden is like stepping onto a ghost ship run aground in the ice. Today, a new kind of disappearance is unfolding. Climate change is forcing entire communities to flee. In villages like Newtok and Shishmaref, Alaska, melting permafrost and coastal erosion are literally washing the ground out from under them. These aren't mysteries. They are slow-motion disasters we are watching in real time. But centuries from now, when archaeologists dig up the ruins of these towns, will they understand? Or will Newtok and Shishmaref become another chapter in the long, chilling story of the Arctic's lost colonies? The pattern is undeniable. The Arctic allows us to build, to adapt, to thrive for a time. But in the end, whether through a slow grind of climate and economics, or a sudden flash of catastrophe and disease, the Arctic always seems to reclaim what is hers. The ruins left behind are a silent, powerful reminder of human ambition. Ice that has been frozen for hundreds of thousands, even millions of years, is now melting. It's revealing landscapes, organisms, and secrets that have been hidden since before human civilization even existed. What's emerging from this ancient ice is rewriting our understanding of the Arctic's past and raising some very troubling questions about its future. In 2016, a 12-year-old boy in Siberia died from anthrax, a disease that hadn't been seen in that region for over 70 years. The source? A reindeer carcass that had been frozen in the permafrost since a 1941 outbreak. It was perfectly preserved for 3/4 of a century. As the permafrost thawed, so did the carcass, releasing viable anthrax spores that infected nearby reindeer herds and eventually human communities. Over 20 people were hospitalized, and hundreds of reindeer died. This tragic incident highlights a disturbing reality. The permafrost is a biological time capsule. It contains bacteria, viruses, and other microorganisms that have been frozen for thousands of years. As the Arctic warms, these organisms are being released. While most are harmless, some remain viable and potentially dangerous. French researchers studying Siberian permafrost discovered a virus they named Pithovirus sibericum, frozen for at least 30,000 years. When they thawed it, the virus was still infectious. Fortunately, only to amoebas, not humans. The same team found other ancient viruses, some over 48,000 years old, all still viable after millennia on ice. If these ancient viruses can survive for so long, what else might be waiting in the thawing permafrost? Could smallpox, a disease officially eradicated in 1980, be preserved in Arctic ice? It's relatively stable and could potentially survive being frozen. We know that the bodies of smallpox victims were buried in Siberian permafrost in regions that are now thawing. If a viable smallpox virus emerged, most of the world's population would be vulnerable, since routine vaccinations ended decades ago. This isn't science fiction. It's a scenario that epidemiologists take seriously enough to have developed response plans for. But it's not just microorganisms. The permafrost also preserves extinct animals with astonishing fidelity. Woolly mammoth carcasses emerge from melting Siberian riverbanks all the time, some so well preserved that their flesh is still pink and soft. Scientists have found mammoths with food still in their stomachs, allowing them to identify their last meals, grasses and flowers that grew in the Arctic during the Ice Age. These discoveries have fueled serious discussions about de-extinction, using preserved genetic material to resurrect the woolly mammoth. It's not as impossible as it sounds. Mammoth DNA has been extracted from frozen tissues, and their closest living relative, the Asian elephant, could potentially serve as a surrogate mother. Research groups are actively working on this, using gene editing to create a hybrid that would resemble a mammoth. The goal isn't just curiosity. Some scientists believe reintroducing large herbivores could help combat climate change by restoring the ancient grassland ecosystems that once covered the Arctic. And it's not just mammoths. Woolly rhinoceroses, cave lions, ancient horses, and even perfectly preserved wolf pups have been found. In 2018, a 57,000-year-old wolf pup was discovered in Canada, so well preserved that its fur, whiskers, and even eyelashes were still intact. It was a snapshot of wolf evolution, frozen in time. These finds are completely rewriting our understanding of when and how species went extinct. The ice also preserves human history. In 1991, melting ice in the Alps revealed Otzi the Iceman, a 5,300-year-old mummy. While he's not from the Arctic, his discovery showed just how well ice preserves human remains. In the Arctic, the bodies of Inuit and other indigenous peoples buried in permafrost have been found. Their features and clothing still identifiable centuries later. These discoveries, while culturally sensitive, offer invaluable information about the history and lives of Arctic peoples. Thawing ice is also revealing ancient hunting sites, tools, and settlements, showing us that people lived in areas now covered by ice, hinting at past periods when the Arctic was warmer and more accessible. But perhaps the most concerning discoveries involve greenhouse gases. Arctic permafrost contains about 1,700 billion metric tons of carbon from frozen organic matter. That's roughly twice the amount currently in our atmosphere. As the permafrost thaws, this matter decomposes, releasing carbon dioxide and methane. This creates a dangerous feedback loop. Warming causes thawing, which releases more greenhouse gases, which causes more warming. Scientists call it the permafrost carbon bomb, and it's not a future threat. Monitoring stations show it's already happening. There's an even more alarming possibility: methane clathrates. These are ice-like structures trapping vast quantities of methane on the Arctic seafloor. As the oceans warm, these clathrates could destabilize, releasing enormous amounts of methane, a greenhouse gas 25 times more potent than carbon dioxide. Evidence suggests this has happened before, triggering rapid global warming 56 million years ago. A repeat today would be catastrophic. On top of that, massive craters are appearing in Siberia, seemingly from explosive releases of underground methane. Some are over 60 meters deep, forming overnight with a flash and a bang. If one of these explosions occurred near a populated area, the results could be devastating. The ice itself tells a story. Ice cores drilled from Greenland give us a climate record stretching back over 100,000 years. They show Earth's climate is far more unstable than we thought, with temperature shifts of 10 degrees Celsius happening within just decades. They also show that today's carbon dioxide levels are higher than at any point in the last 800,000 years. We've pushed our atmosphere into uncharted territory. The Arctic ice is now melting faster than any model predicted. The Northwest Passage is now navigable most summers. The Arctic Ocean could be ice-free in summer within decades. When that happens, the dark ocean water will absorb sunlight instead of reflecting it, accelerating warming even further and disrupting weather patterns across the globe. The secrets emerging from the ice are rewriting our past and forcing us to confront an uncertain future. The ice preserved ancient worlds, and now it's releasing them. It makes you wonder, what world are we creating? What will future ice cores say about our time? And will there be anyone left to read that story? Beneath the Arctic Ocean's icy surface lies a world even less explored than the ice itself. This realm, shrouded in darkness for much of the year and hostile to human presence, remains one of Earth's last great frontiers. But recent breakthroughs in underwater technology are finally peeling back the layers of this frozen world, revealing an Arctic Ocean far stranger and more complex than anyone ever imagined. The Arctic is our planet's smallest and shallowest ocean, but don't let its size fool you. It holds features that continue to baffle scientists. The most perplexing of all is the Beaufort Gyre. Picture a massive, spinning whirlpool in the southern Arctic Ocean, acting like a giant reservoir for fresh water. Right now, this gyre holds more fresh water than all the Great Lakes combined. This water comes from melting ice, rivers, and less salty water flowing in from the Pacific. For decades, winds have been pushing this water inward, trapping it. But what if those winds change? Climate change might be the trigger. If the gyre were to suddenly release this massive volume of fresh water into the North Atlantic, the consequences could be catastrophic. Why? Because fresh water is less dense than salt water. A sudden release would create a cap on the ocean's surface, potentially disrupting the Great Ocean Conveyor Belt that regulates climate across the Northern Hemisphere. Think of it as the planet's circulatory system. If it gets blocked, it could trigger rapid cooling in Europe and mess with rainfall patterns across continents. This isn't just a theory. It happened before, about 12,800 years ago, plunging the world into a 1 to 300 year cold snap. Scientists are watching the Beaufort Gyre closely. It's behaving erratically, sometimes releasing water, other times storing more. We're essentially staring at a loaded gun pointed at our climate, with no idea when or if it will fire. And the mysteries don't stop there. The Arctic seafloor itself is scarred with long parallel furrows, some stretching for hundreds of kilometers. The initial theory was that these were tracks left by gigantic icebergs scraping the bottom during the last ice age. But some of these grooves are in water far too deep for even the biggest icebergs to have reached. Alternative theories like underwater landslides or even tectonic shifts don't quite fit the evidence either. The seafloor is telling a story, but we haven't learned how to read the language yet. Then there's the fire beneath the ice. The Gackle Ridge, a submerged mountain chain, is one of the slowest spreading mid-ocean ridges on Earth. Yet, it produces shockingly large volcanic eruptions. In 1999, scientists detected a swarm of earthquakes there, and when they finally investigated, they found evidence of explosive eruptions happening right under the ice, something never seen before. These weren't the gentle lava flows you'd expect. These were violent blasts, happening under immense water pressure that should have smothered them. This discovery proves the Arctic seafloor is far more geologically active than we thought. These volcanic hotspots also create another marvel: hydrothermal vents. These are underwater hot springs spewing superheated, mineral-rich water from the Earth's crust. In the freezing, dark abyss, these vents create oases of life. Bacteria here don't need sunlight. They get their energy from chemicals. They form the base of a food chain for bizarre creatures you won't find anywhere else. Eyeless shrimp, giant tube worms and strange crabs. Arctic vent life is especially fascinating because it has to survive not just extreme heat and pressure, but also the surrounding sub-zero seawater. These ecosystems might even be our best clue for what life could look like on other worlds, like Jupiter's icy moon Europa or Saturn's moon Enceladus, both of which may have liquid oceans beneath their frozen shells. The Arctic Ocean is also a playground of strange sounds. The ice cover acts like a bizarre acoustic mirror, creating channels where sound can travel for hundreds of kilometers with very little loss. During the Cold War, submarines discovered they could sometimes hear other vessels from incredibly far away. Other times, sounds would just vanish, absorbed or scattered in ways that still defy prediction. This acoustic chaos is a constant challenge for submarine navigation, and it also impacts the whales and seals that rely on sound to navigate and communicate in the dark. Speaking of which, the life here is full of its own mysteries. We've all heard of the Greenland shark, a creature that can live for over 400 years, hunting nearly blind in the deep. But there's also the Arctic bristletail, a transparent fish with natural antifreeze in its blood, allowing it to survive in water that would freeze other fish solid. Then there's polar gigantism. Creatures like Arctic sea spiders grow to enormous sizes, some with leg spans over 30 centimeters. Why do they get so big? It might be a combination of slower metabolisms, higher oxygen in cold water, and fewer predators. And in this dark world, many creatures create their own light through bioluminescence, using it to attract prey, startle predators, or even find a mate. During the Cold War, submarines from both sides reported hearing strange noises, mechanical sounds, and biological calls that didn't match any known species. While many were eventually identified as ice cracking or whale songs, some remain unexplained. Remember the bloop? That ultra-low frequency sound detected in 1997, loud enough to be heard over 5,000 kilometers away. For a while, people speculated it was a sea monster larger than any known animal. It was later determined to likely be an icequake, a massive iceberg cracking apart. Still, it shows just how much we have to learn about the sounds of the deep. The Arctic also holds onto human history. Hundreds of shipwrecks lie on the seafloor, many remarkably preserved by the cold water that slows decay and keeps wood-boring organisms away. These wrecks are time capsules from centuries of polar exploration. But there's also a more modern and more dangerous legacy. The Cold War left behind abandoned listening stations, unexploded weapons, and even nuclear submarines. The Soviet submarine K-278 Komsomolets sank in 1989 with nuclear weapons aboard. It still lies on the seafloor, a ticking time bomb of potential contamination, too deep to safely recover. As the Arctic ice melts, a new chapter is beginning. The region is thought to hold about 13% of the world's undiscovered oil and 30% of its undiscovered natural gas. As access opens up, a new scramble for resources has begun, reigniting geopolitical tensions between Russia, Canada, the US, and other Arctic nations. Who owns the seafloor beneath the North Pole? The race is on, and the outcome is uncertain. Have you ever thought about what makes a compass point north? It seems simple, right? A little needle drawn to the North Pole. But what if I told you the North Pole isn't where you think it is, and it's on the move? The Arctic, a land of ice and light, holds a secret relationship with our planet's magnetic field, creating mysteries that have baffled scientists and confused explorers for centuries. At the heart of this puzzle is the North Magnetic Pole. Now, this isn't the same as the geographic North Pole, which is a fixed point at the top of the world. The magnetic pole is a ghost, a wandering point where Earth's magnetic field lines point straight down. For centuries, it drifted slowly across the Canadian Arctic. But recently, something strange has happened. Its journey has accelerated from about 15 kilometers per year to over 50. It's now racing out of Canada and heading towards Siberia at a speed that has scientists scrambling for answers. So what's causing this mad dash? The answer lies deep beneath our feet, nearly 3,000 kilometers down in Earth's outer core. Here, a swirling ocean of molten iron generates our planet's magnetic field. It seems a jet stream of this liquid iron flowing under Canada and Siberia has changed its pattern, dragging the magnetic pole along with it. Since we can't exactly take a trip to the outer core, these are our best guesses, pieced together from surface measurements and complex computer models. This wandering pole isn't just a scientific curiosity, it creates real-world problems. Navigation systems, from the one in your phone to those guiding jumbo jets and military operations, rely on an accurate model of the magnetic field. This model has to be updated constantly. In fact, in 2019, an unprecedented early update was required, because the pole moved so much faster than expected that navigation data was becoming dangerously inaccurate. But the rapid movement raises an even bigger, more unsettling question. Could this be a sign of a coming magnetic pole reversal? That's when the North and South magnetic poles flip places. It's happened many times in Earth's history, with the last major flip about 780,000 years ago. Geologically speaking, we're overdue for another one. Now, overdue could mean tomorrow or 100,000 years from now, but the possibility is real. What would a reversal look like? It wouldn't be an overnight switch. The process would likely take thousands of years. During this time, the magnetic field would weaken and become chaotic, with multiple north and south poles popping up all over the globe. Our planet's magnetic shield would be weaker, leaving us more exposed to harmful solar radiation and cosmic rays. This could damage satellites, pose risks to astronauts, and even people on high-altitude flights, and potentially affect our climate and life on Earth in ways we can't yet predict. Some scientists have even linked past reversals to extinction events, though the evidence is still debated. The Arctic is where you can see the magnetic field's power most vividly. The spectacular auroras, the northern lights, are caused by solar particles spiraling down magnetic field lines into our atmosphere. As you get closer to the magnetic pole, compasses become notoriously unreliable, spinning wildly or pointing in random directions. Early Arctic explorers documented this chaos, entering zones where their most trusted navigational tool simply gave up. They were stumbling into magnetic anomalies, areas where local geology disrupts the main field. The Arctic also gets a front-row seat to another phenomenon: space weather. This is the constant battle between the solar wind and Earth's magnetic field. When the sun unleashes a powerful solar storm, the Arctic is where the impact is most intense. While it creates breathtaking auroras, it also disrupts radio communications, scrambles GPS signals, and can even knock out power grids. In March 1989, A powerful geomagnetic storm did just that, causing a massive 9-hour blackout across Quebec and leaving 6 million people in the dark. The storm induced powerful electrical currents in the power grid, tripping circuits and frying transformers, and that was just a taste of what's possible. The Carrington event of 1859 was so powerful, it set telegraph offices on fire. If a storm of that magnitude hit us today, our modern, tech-dependent world would be in serious trouble. It could destroy hundreds of satellites, cause continent-spanning blackouts, and take down the internet, GPS, and communication systems for months, even years. The economic fallout would be in the trillions of dollars. Scientists are constantly watching the sun, looking for coronal mass ejections, giant clouds of plasma hurtling toward us. We usually get 1 to 3 days warning, just enough time to put satellites into safe mode and brace for impact. But it's a constant threat that we're still learning how to manage. Beyond these global-scale events, the Arctic is filled with smaller, localized magnetic mysteries. Pilots have reported strange instrument failures and even electrical discharges inside their cockpits while flying over certain regions. Indigenous peoples have long spoken of haunted places where compasses spin and animals refuse to go. Modern science is now discovering that many of these locations do, in fact, have highly unusual magnetic fields. This raises a fascinating question. Can humans sense magnetic fields? While we don't have a known magnetic organ like birds or sea turtles, some studies suggest we might have a hidden vestigial sense. Could these strange feelings people report in magnetically active areas be a faint echo of a sense we've long forgotten? The challenges continue beneath the waves. Submarines navigating under the Arctic ice face a triple threat. Their compasses are useless near the pole, their inertial guidance systems drift over time, and GPS can't penetrate ice and water. During the Cold War, the Arctic was a tense underwater battlefield where American and Soviet subs stalked each other in a silent, dangerous game of cat and mouse, with the unpredictable environment being as much an enemy as the opposing navy. Today, the Arctic's magnetic secrets are also a key to its future. Magnetic surveys from the air help geologists map what's under the ice, revealing ancient impact craters, volcanic features, and, most importantly for some, valuable mineral deposits. As the ice retreats, a new rush for resources is beginning, guided by these magnetic maps. This search for wealth, however, brings with it a heavy responsibility to protect the fragile Arctic ecosystem. Even climate change is connected to this magnetic web. As ice sheets melt, the Earth's crust beneath them slowly rises. This movement could, in theory, alter local magnetic fields, creating yet another feedback loop in our planet's complex system. The wandering pole, the threat of space weather, and the strange anomalies scattered across the ice all remind us that our planet is a living, breathing, dynamic world. We are just beginning to understand the deep forces that shape our environment, from the core to the cosmos. Did you know the Arctic can literally drive you mad? I'm not talking about the cold or the danger. I'm talking about something far stranger, how the Arctic warps time and consciousness, pushing even the most stable minds to the brink of insanity. At the heart of this mystery is the polar night, months of complete unending darkness. Imagine the sun disappearing not for a day but for half a year. That's the reality north of the Arctic Circle. This isn't just a gloomy day. It's a total absence of sunlight, broken only by the moon and the aurora. Our bodies are simply not built for this. We run on an internal clock, a circadian rhythm that's set by the cycle of day and night. Sunlight is the master switch. When you take it away for months, that clock goes haywire. Early explorers in the Arctic documented the terrifying results. Their crews became depressed, paranoid, and irritable. Sleep patterns disintegrated. Some couldn't sleep at all, others slept constantly. Time itself seemed to melt away. Hours felt like minutes, and days blended into an endless now. In the most extreme cases, men broke down completely, hearing voices, seeing phantoms, and succumbing to paranoid delusions. As explorer Frederick Cook wrote of his Antarctic overwintering, "The winter and the darkness had fallen upon us. For long months our world was enveloped in the blackness, which produces a condition that might be compared to that of a mild insanity." Modern science backs this up. Seasonal affective disorder is rampant in high latitudes, but it's more than just depression. The polar night can trigger full-blown hallucinations. Explorers reported seeing phantom lights in the sky, hearing impossible sounds from the empty darkness, and sensing unseen presences stalking them on the ice. Were these just tricks of a stressed mind? Partly yes. The Arctic night is a sensory deprivation chamber. The brain, starved of input, starts creating its own reality to fill the void. But there might be something else at play. Scientists talk about infrasound, low-frequency sound that we can't hear but can feel. It can be generated by high winds, shifting ice, and atmospheric weirdness. Studies have shown that infrasound can cause feelings of unease, anxiety, and even visual distortions. It's often found in places people claim are haunted. Could the wailing Arctic winds and groaning ice be generating infrasound, literally creating ghosts in the minds of explorers? It's a chillingly plausible idea. Time perception also completely collapses. Without the sun to mark the passage of days, clocks and calendars feel meaningless. Explorers reported losing track of whether it was morning or evening. Days blurred into one long, confusing twilight. This temporal chaos is psychologically devastating. We need a sense of past, present, and future to maintain our identity. When that structure dissolves, so does the self. Some explorers described a terrifying feeling of detachment, as if they were a ghost watching their own body from the outside. Indigenous Arctic peoples, like the Inuit, understood this danger. They developed sophisticated social rituals, storytelling traditions, and community gatherings to keep their minds anchored during the long, dark months. These weren't just pastimes, they were psychological survival tools honed over millennia. European explorers without these cultural anchors often fared much worse, despite their rigid military discipline and scheduled activities. Then, when the sun finally returns, the madness takes a different form. The polar day begins, 24 hours of unrelenting sunlight. This is just as disruptive as the darkness. Sleep becomes almost impossible. People can experience a kind of Arctic fever, a manic state of hyperactivity and poor judgment. They'd undertake reckless tasks and make irrational decisions, fueled by the endless daylight. The human body just can't cope with perpetual light any better than it can with perpetual darkness. These psychological effects have real-world consequences. Military operations in the Arctic have to account for degraded performance and impaired judgment in their personnel. Some historians wonder if these mental breakdowns could explain historical mysteries. Could the doomed Franklin expedition's bizarre decisions like dragging luxury items while abandoning essentials, be a symptom of minds shattered by multiple Arctic winters. The most profound psychological effect might be what S called depersonalization, a feeling of being utterly detached from yourself. Journals from polar explorers describe this state with eerie clarity, feeling like an observer to their own life, emotionally numb, trapped in a present moment with no real past or future. It might be a coping mechanism, a way for the mind to distance itself from unbearable suffering. But this detachment leaves scars. Many explorers struggle to readjust to normal life, feeling disconnected and haunted by their experiences long after returning home. The Arctic is a powerful teacher. It shows us that our sense of self, our perception of reality, and even our sanity are far more fragile than we think. They depend on the simple, predictable rhythms of the world around us. Take those away, and you don't just challenge the body's ability to survive, you challenge the very fabric of consciousness itself. Way before modern explorers ever set foot in the Arctic, there were people who didn't just survive in the frozen world, they thrived. These ancient cultures built lives in places that would have been a death sentence for others. But they left behind a trail of incredible mysteries, cities frozen in time, strange artifacts, and ways of life that make us question everything we thought we knew about human history. The story starts over 30,000 years ago, during the last ice age. Think about it. Most of the northern world was buried under glaciers. How did Stone Age people manage to live in an environment that could defeat even today's best-equipped explorers? We have some clues, but the full picture is still a puzzle. Take the Gravettian culture, for example. These people lived on the very edge of the glaciers about 33,000 years ago, hunting woolly mammoths and rhinos. Wood was scarce, so what did they do? They built their homes from mammoth bones and hides. They weren't just surviving, they were creating beautiful art and complex societies. At a site called Dolní Věstonice in the Czech Republic, archaeologists found something astounding: ceramic figurines dating back 26,000 years. This is some of the oldest pottery ever discovered, and they weren't even using it for pots or bowls. Why were they firing clay into art thousands of years before anyone thought to make a simple pot? It seems they were experimenting with technology far earlier than we ever imagined. And it gets more interesting. These Ice Age people had incredible trade networks. Shells from the Mediterranean Sea have been found at sites hundreds of miles inland. This wasn't a world of isolated, primitive tribes. It was a connected world, with groups trading and interacting across vast distances, showing a level of organization that's truly mind-blowing for that era. As the Ice Age ended and the world warmed up, people pushed north, following the retreating ice and animal herds. By about 10,000 years ago, humans had reached the high Arctic, some of the most unforgiving places on Earth. What drove them into these lands of extreme cold and months-long darkness? One of the most mysterious groups was the Independence Eye culture, who lived in northern Greenland around 4,500 years ago. They lived in a polar desert, hunting muskoxen with stone tools. Their population was tiny, maybe just a few hundred people, and then they vanished. Were they just following the animals? Or were they refugees or explorers driven by something we can't understand? We simply don't know. Then there was the Dorset culture. We've talked about their mysterious disappearance before, but their skills were legendary. They were masters of hunting seals at their breathing holes in the ice, a technique that required unbelievable patience and knowledge. They were also incredible artists, carving tiny, intricate figures from ivory. Some of these carvings are really strange. Human figures that look like skeletons, beings that are half human, half animal, and creatures that don't match any known species. These figures hint at a rich spiritual world, but without any written records, their true meaning is lost to us. Their architecture was also ingenious. They built semi-underground homes from stone and whalebone, using the earth itself for insulation. Some even had cold trap entrances, a clever design to keep the warm air in and the cold air out. This wasn't primitive building. It was applied science. The Dorset were eventually replaced by the Thule people, the ancestors of the modern Inuit. The Thule brought a wave of new technology, bigger boats for hunting massive bowhead whales, better harpoons, and dog sleds that completely changed travel. In just a few centuries, they spread all the way from Alaska to Greenland. But the Thule had their own secrets. Some of their ancient structures are aligned with the sun and moon, marking solstices and equinoxes. This shows they were tracking the heavens, likely for a calendar to time their hunts and migrations. But some alignments are so complex, it suggests an interest in astronomy that went way beyond just practical needs. Could they have known more about the stars than we give them credit for? The Arctic also holds clues of cultures meeting who should have been worlds apart. We found Norse artifacts at Inuit sites, and not just scavenged junk. We found items that were clearly modified and used by Inuit craftsmen, suggesting direct trade. On the flip side, Norse settlements have items made from walrus ivory that could only have come from Inuit hunters. Sometimes this contact was peaceful, but other times it was violent. We see destroyed settlements and remains showing signs of conflict. This brings us to one of the most hotly debated mysteries, the Kensington runestone. Found in Minnesota in 1898, this stone has inscriptions that claim a Norse expedition was there in 1362. More than a century before Columbus. Most experts think it's a fake, but if it's real, it means Norse explorers traveled thousands of miles from Greenland, through the Arctic and deep into the heart of North America. It's an extraordinary claim, and without more evidence, it remains a tantalizing but unproven idea. Perhaps one of the biggest surprises from the Arctic is evidence of ancient metalworking. Archaeologists have found copper and bronze tools in Canada that date to a time when native peoples weren't supposed to have that technology. Some of it was locally sourced copper, hammered into shape. But other artifacts appear to have been smelted, a process requiring intense heat that would have been very difficult to achieve with Arctic fuels. How did they do it? And why did the technology disappear? It's a complete mystery. Ancient rock art across the Arctic adds another layer of intrigue. We see hunting scenes, sure, but also bizarre figures with animal heads, strange creatures and geometric patterns. Some images even look like boats with sails, in places and times where European contact shouldn't have happened. What were they trying to tell us? And then there are the Inuksut, the famous stone cairns built by the Inuit. They were used for navigation and hunting, but some also seem to be astronomical markers, aligned to the sunrise on the solstice or the rising of certain stars. They are a library of knowledge written in stone, and we are still learning to read it. Because of the extreme cold, the Arctic preserves things that would rot away anywhere else. We've found frozen bodies that tell us what people ate for their last meal, what diseases they had, and even what they were wearing. A famous find in Greenland from 1972 is known as the Frozen Family. 8 people from the Thule culture, so well preserved after 500 years that you could still see their facial tattoos. It was a tragic discovery, but gave us an unprecedented look into their lives. Of course, finds like these bring up important questions. These are people, not just artifacts, and we have to balance our quest for knowledge with respect for the dead and their living descendants. The ancient people of the Arctic didn't just survive. They built sustainable, meaningful, and rich cultures that lasted for thousands of years. The real mystery isn't how they managed to live, but how they managed to live so well. Their stories, frozen in the ice, are a powerful reminder. They show us that even the most successful societies can disappear when the world changes around them. The Arctic. It's a place that conjures images of ice, snow, and bone-chilling cold. But beyond the stereotypes, the Arctic is a realm of bizarre, unpredictable, and sometimes terrifying weather that defies our understanding of how the atmosphere is supposed to work. This is a world of upside-down weather patterns, phantom mountain ranges appearing in the sky, and mysterious fog banks that can swallow a ship in seconds. The Arctic's atmosphere is a laboratory of strange meteorological phenomena, and today we're diving into its most baffling secrets. One of the most disorienting and dangerous things you can experience is a whiteout. This isn't just heavy snow or fog, it's a total sensory void. Blowing snow and clouds merge with the white landscape, erasing the horizon completely. There are no shadows, no texture, no sense of depth. Your brain, starved of visual cues, can't tell up from down, near from far. Pilots have flown their planes straight into the ground, completely unaware they were descending. Travelers on foot have walked right off cliffs or into deadly cracks in the sea ice. In a whiteout, even standing still is a challenge. People report feeling dizzy and nauseous as their sense of balance completely fails. The only safe thing to do is to stop and wait, sometimes for hours or even days, immobile in the freezing cold. Then you have Arctic temperature inversions, which create a world of bizarre illusions. Normally, the air gets colder the higher you go, but during an inversion, a layer of extremely cold, dense air gets trapped near the surface with warmer air sitting on top of it. This stable, layered atmosphere does strange things to sound and light. Sound can travel for enormous distances one moment and be completely muffled the next. But the visual effects are even more spectacular. Light rays bend as they pass through the different temperature layers, creating powerful mirages. Early explorers documented seeing entire cities and castles floating in the sky, what we now call Fata Morgana mirages. These inversions can make distant mountain ranges appear to hover above the horizon, or stretch and duplicate ships at sea, making one vessel look like a whole fleet. They can even make the sun appear square or split into multiple images. Imagine sailing on a calm sea when suddenly you're enveloped in a thick, steaming fog that appears from nowhere. That's Arctic sea smoke. It happens when frigid air blows over relatively warmer open water, causing the water to literally steam. Visibility can drop to 0 in seconds. A ship can vanish from sight while its crew is still talking on the radio. Pilots flying over cracks in the sea ice have reported being suddenly blinded by these fog banks, forcing them into emergency climbs to escape. Arctic winds are a force of nature all their own. Katabatic winds, for example, aren't driven by typical weather systems. They are simply rivers of cold, dense air flowing downhill off massive ice sheets, powered by gravity alone. These winds can accelerate to hurricane force with almost no warning, reaching speeds of over 300 kilometers per hour. Anything caught in their path, people, equipment, even entire structures, can be utterly destroyed. It's like a liquid avalanche of air, unstoppable and immensely powerful. Perhaps one of the most shocking phenomena is the sudden winter warming event. Picture this. It's the middle of the Arctic winter, and temperatures are normally a frigid minus 30 or 40 degrees Celsius. Then, suddenly, the temperature at the North Pole can shoot up above freezing. This happens when the polar vortex, that big swirl of cold air usually locked over the pole, weakens or breaks apart. When it does, frigid Arctic air spills south, causing deep freezes in places like Texas or Europe, while warmer air from the south floods into the Arctic. These paradoxical events, where Alaska is warmer than Florida, are becoming more frequent, and scientists believe it's a direct consequence of our changing climate. The Arctic also experiences weather bomb cyclones. These are storms that intensify with explosive speed, their central pressure plummeting in less than 24 hours. They generate hurricane-force winds, massive waves, and heavy snow. For ships at sea, they are a nightmare. The combination of towering waves and freezing spray can cause ice to build up so rapidly on a ship's superstructure that it becomes top-heavy and capsizes. Several ships have been lost to these bomb cyclones, vanishing without a trace. And if all that wasn't strange enough, the ground itself can explode. These events are called frostquakes, or cryoseisms. When temperatures plummet rapidly, water trapped in the soil and rock freezes and expands, building up immense pressure. Eventually, the frozen ground can't take it anymore, and it fractures violently, creating a loud boom and shaking the ground like a small earthquake. People report their houses shaking and hearing what sounds like an explosion. As climate change brings more extreme temperature swings, these once rare frostquakes are becoming more common, leaving communities confused and anxious. Even the ice crystals in the Arctic air are special. Tiny, suspended crystals known as diamond dust can bend sunlight to create stunning optical displays like sundogs and halos. But sometimes the conditions are just right to create truly unique phenomena. Glowing pillars of light reaching into the sky, strange colored arcs, or even complete circles of light that surround you. These are fleeting moments of beauty, created by a perfect and unrepeatable combination of crystal shape, size, and orientation. All these strange phenomena are being amplified by climate change. The Arctic is warming at least twice as fast as the rest of the planet. Melting ice exposes dark ocean water, which absorbs more heat, which melts more ice. It's a vicious cycle. This rapid warming is breaking down historical weather patterns, making the Arctic even more unpredictable. The traditional knowledge of indigenous peoples, built over millennia of observing the environment, is becoming less reliable. For cultures that depend on predicting the weather for survival, this is an existential threat. Our best weather models struggle to keep up. They are trained on historical data. But what happens when the weather is unlike anything we've seen before? The models fail. And this failure has real-world consequences for aviation, shipping, and scientific research in a region of growing global importance. The Arctic's strange weather is a stark reminder that our planet's systems are incredibly complex and interconnected. It's the place where our atmosphere meets space, where the raw power of nature is on full display. For decades, it was a stage for operations so secret, but during the Cold War, this frozen frontier was a battleground, a place of high-stakes tension where superpowers played a dangerous game. Their details are still classified today. This militarization left behind a legacy of mysteries, abandoned bases with unknown purposes, lost nuclear weapons, and surveillance systems whose true power we can only guess at. The dawn of the nuclear age put the Arctic squarely in the crosshairs of global conflict. Why? Because the shortest path for an intercontinental ballistic missile between the Soviet Union and the United States was straight over the North Pole. This transformed the Arctic into a front line for early warnings and a potential nuclear battlefield. Both sides scrambled to build a vast network of military infrastructure. Radar stations, missile bases, and submarine patrol zones dotted the landscape. The most famous of these was the Dew Line, the distant early warning line. It was a chain of radar stations stretching across Alaska, Canada, and Greenland, built in the 1950s to detect incoming Soviet bombers. While it was a marvel of technology for its time, it came at a huge environmental cost. When the bases were decommissioned, everything was just left behind: diesel generators, equipment contaminated with toxic PCBs, and tons of hazardous waste. These toxic legacies are still poisoning the fragile Arctic ecosystems today, but the Dew Line held more than just radar dishes. Rumors have swirled for years that some of these remote stations were used for classified experiments. Were they testing biological sensors, monitoring Soviet nuclear tests, or maybe even trying to detect submarines through the ice with experimental tech? The official documents are still locked away, and the personnel who served there are bound by oaths of secrecy. Separating fact from Cold War fiction is nearly impossible. Of course, the Soviets weren't just sitting back. They built their own massive network of radar stations, air bases, and submarine facilities across their own Arctic territories. They even constructed entire closed cities, secret communities dedicated to designing, building, and storing nuclear weapons. Places like Severomorsk, home to the powerful Northern Fleet, and the island of Novaya Zemlya, which became a nuclear testing ground. Over 200 nuclear explosions rocked Novaya Zemlya, including the detonation of the largest nuclear weapon ever created, the Tsar Bomba. This 50-megaton monster unleashed a fireball 5 kilometers wide. The environmental fallout from Soviet nuclear testing was catastrophic and remains poorly understood. Radioactive contamination spread far and wide. Some tests even deliberately released radiation to study fallout patterns. The full extent of the damage and its long-term effects on people living nearby may never be known. The Cold War in the Arctic also had its Broken Arrow incidents, the military term for accidents involving nuclear weapons. In 1968, a B-52 bomber carrying 4 hydrogen bombs crashed near Thule Air Base in Greenland. The impact scattered radioactive material across the ice. While cleanup crews worked frantically to recover the debris, one of the nuclear bombs was never fully accounted for. Did it sink through the ice into the ocean? Was it completely vaporized in the fire? We still don't know for sure if all the plutonium was recovered. The Soviets lost their share of nuclear assets in the Arctic as well. The submarine K-27 was deliberately scuttled in the Kara Sea, with its nuclear reactor still on board. Another, the K-159, sank while being towed, taking its nuclear material to the seafloor. These wrecks are ticking time bombs, slowly leaking radiation and posing a long-term threat to the marine environment. Submarine warfare beneath the Arctic ice pushed technology and human endurance to the absolute limit. Both American and Soviet subs conducted secret patrols under the ice cap, gathering intelligence and positioning themselves for a potential nuclear war. These missions were incredibly dangerous. Massive ridges of ice, called ice keels, could extend 50 meters down, creating underwater obstacles that could crush a submarine's hull. Navigation was a nightmare without GPS, relying on unreliable compasses. If there was an emergency, surfacing meant finding a natural opening in the ice or using the sub's own structure to break through. There were many close calls. Reports suggest American and Soviet submarines had near collisions under the ice. Some crews became trapped, unable to find a way out, barely escaping with their lives. It's believed that at least one Soviet submarine was lost under the ice, its crew entombed in their steel vessel, slowly running out of air. The skies were just as tense. Bomber crews on both sides were on constant alert, ready to fly over the Arctic to deliver their nuclear payloads. The stress was immense. A single false alarm, caused by anything from a flock of geese to a misplaced training tape, could trigger a one-way mission that would end civilization. And these false alarms happened, bringing humanity terrifyingly close to accidental nuclear war. Scientists and engineers had to design systems that could tell the difference between a real threat and natural Arctic phenomena. The northern lights could mimic a missile launch on radar. Shifting ice could create seismic signals that looked like a nuclear test. This balancing act was never perfect, and the price of getting it wrong was unthinkable. The militarization didn't stop at nuclear weapons. The Soviets allegedly tested biological weapons at remote Siberian facilities, while the United States tested chemical nerve agents in Alaska. The details are still classified, but the environmental contamination at some of these sites remains a problem today. Then there was Project Iceworm, a top-secret American plan to build a network of mobile nuclear missile launchers under the Greenland ice sheet. The public cover story was Camp Century, a scientific research station powered by a nuclear reactor. In reality, engineers were digging tunnels in the ice, hoping to create a launch system that would be impossible for the Soviets to target. The project was eventually abandoned when they realized the ice sheet was constantly moving and deforming. Camp Century was sealed up, leaving its nuclear reactor and waste buried in the ice. Now, as climate change melts the Greenland ice sheet, there's a real fear that this Cold War waste, radioactive, chemical, and biological, could be re-exposed. The Cold War also saw some truly bizarre projects. The British and Canadians explored building aircraft carriers out of pykrete, a mixture of ice and sawdust. These giant ice ships would have been virtually unsinkable. The Soviets reportedly experimented with Arctic-based laser weapons, taking advantage of the clear, cold air. Today, the Arctic is heating up again, both literally and geopolitically. Russia is rebuilding its old Soviet-era bases and flexing its military muscle. China has declared itself a near-Arctic state, and is showing increasing interest. In response, NATO countries, including the United States and Canada, are boosting their own military presence in the region. The indigenous peoples of the Arctic watch all of this with deep concern. They fear a repeat of the Cold War's mistakes, where their homelands are once again treated as a strategic chessboard, threatening their communities and the environment. The Cold War left deep scars on the Arctic, environmental contamination that will last for millennia, and mysteries that may never be solved. The frozen battleground of the past still holds its secrets, buried under ice and time. But as the ice melts, some of those secrets are beginning to surface, for better or for worse. How is it possible for life to exist in the freezing, unforgiving expanse of the Arctic? It turns out, this frozen world is home to some of the toughest organisms on Earth, creatures we call extremophiles. These lovers of extremes don't just survive in conditions that would kill most living things. They thrive. By studying them, we're not only pushing the boundaries of biology, but also getting clues about what life might look like on other planets. Imagine bacteria living deep in the permafrost, at temperatures well below freezing. These aren't just frozen in time, they are actively alive but in super slow motion. A single cell division might take centuries. To pull this off, they've developed their own biological antifreeze, special proteins that stop ice crystals from forming inside their cells. Their cell membranes stay fluid, even in the biting cold, and their enzymes work perfectly in conditions that would destroy ours. Some of these tiny survivors are millions of years old, frozen for millennia, only to thaw out and get right back to living, as if no time has passed at all. This makes you wonder, what does it even mean to be alive? It's not just microbes. The Arctic ice fish has a similar trick. It produces antifreeze glycoproteins in its blood. These molecules latch onto tiny ice crystals and stop them from growing, preventing the fish from freezing solid in the sub-zero water it calls home. These proteins are so effective that scientists are studying them for everything from preserving organs for transplant to improving frozen foods. Then there's the wood frog. This little amphibian, found in Arctic and subarctic regions, does something truly mind-boggling. Every winter it freezes solid. Up to 70% of its body water turns to ice. Its heart stops. Its brain goes dark. By almost any definition, it's dead. But when spring arrives, the frog thaws, its heart starts beating again, and it just hops away. The secret? Before freezing, it floods its cells with glucose, which acts as a natural cryoprotectant, preventing ice crystals from shredding its cells from the inside out. The insects here are just as incredible. Take the woolly bear caterpillar in the high Canadian Arctic. It can survive being frozen to temperatures below -70 Celsius. Its life cycle is extraordinarily long, taking up to 14 years to complete. It spends 13 of those years as a caterpillar, freezing solid each winter and thawing each summer, just to gather enough food to finally transform into a moth, breed and die, all within a few short weeks. And we can't forget the tardigrades. These microscopic water bears are the ultimate survivors. They can handle temperatures near absolute zero and well over 100 degrees Celsius. They can withstand crushing pressures and radiation doses that would be instantly lethal to us. They can even survive the vacuum of space. They do this by entering a state called cryptobiosis, where they completely halt their metabolism and can remain in this death-like state for decades, waiting for better conditions to return. Marine life also has its own set of challenges. Seawater freezes at about -2°C, but Arctic cod live in water that's actively turning into slush around them. They pump out so much antifreeze protein that they can swim through a mixture of liquid water and ice crystals without freezing themselves. It's a constant, energy-draining battle, but it allows them to own a habitat where few others can follow. The Arctic tern performs one of the most epic migrations on the planet, flying from the Arctic to the Antarctic and back every year, a journey of about 70,000 kilometers. How do they navigate across vast, featureless oceans? They use a combination of the sun, the stars, the Earth's magnetic field, and maybe even polarized light and smell. It's a multi-layered GPS that ensures they always find their way. Larger animals have their own impressive toolkit. Caribou and reindeer have noses that warm up frigid air before it hits their lungs. Their legs can operate at much colder temperatures than their core, saving precious body heat. Even their hooves change with the seasons, becoming soft in the summer for traction on the tundra, and hard and sharp in the winter for digging through snow. Perhaps most amazingly, they can see ultraviolet light. This gives them a secret view of the world, allowing them to spot lichen, their main winter food, against the snow, and even see urine marks left by predators. Muskoxen, with their incredibly warm underwool called kiviut, can withstand the harshest winters. When threatened, they form a defensive circle, with the calves protected in the middle. This strategy worked perfectly against wolves for thousands of years, but sadly, it leaves them vulnerable to human hunters. Even the plants here are masters of survival. The Arctic poppy has bowl-shaped flowers that act like tiny satellite dishes, tracking the sun to focus its warmth on their reproductive parts. The Arctic willow grows low to the ground, hugging it for warmth and protection from the wind. Some of these willows are hundreds of years old, but only a few centimeters tall, ancient trees in miniature. And then there are lichens, a partnership between a fungus and an alga. They grow on bare rock, surviving conditions that would kill almost anything else. They grow incredibly slowly, maybe a few millimeters a century, but can live for thousands of years, making some of them the oldest living things on Earth. Studying these extremophiles opens up a universe of possibilities. If life can exist here in these conditions, why not elsewhere? The subsurface oceans of moons like Europa and Enceladus, or the icy depths of Mars, might just harbor their own versions of these tough Arctic survivors. But the Arctic is changing, and fast. Climate change is disrupting the delicate balance these species have perfected over millennia. The cold they are adapted to is disappearing. The timing of seasons is shifting, throwing migrations, breeding, and feeding into chaos. The Arctic has become a real-time laboratory for evolution. Species must adapt faster than ever before, or face extinction. We're watching an experiment unfold, one whose outcome is uncertain for the remarkable creatures of the North. Beneath the Arctic Ocean's icy waves lies a realm as diverse and mysterious as any on land. We're talking about undersea mountains, volcanic ridges, and deep basins that we are only just beginning to understand. The Arctic seafloor is one of the least explored places on our planet. Its secrets locked away by thick ice and water so cold that life itself operates on a different clock. Let's start with the Lomonosov Ridge. This isn't just any underwater mountain range. It's a colossal structure stretching 1,800 kilometers across the Arctic Ocean. It rises 3 kilometers from the surrounding seafloor, a silent giant hidden beneath the waves. Geologists believe it's a fragment of a continent torn away from Eurasia about 50 million years ago. But this geological wonder has also sparked a modern-day treasure hunt. Russia, Canada, and Denmark all claim the Lomonosov Ridge is an extension of their own continental shelves. Why? Because under international law, that could give them rights to whatever resources lie beneath. In 2007, a Russian submarine planted a titanium flag on the ridge right under the North Pole. While it was a bold statement, it holds no legal weight, but it clearly shows the Arctic seafloor has become a hotly contested territory. Nations are racing to map and claim this underwater frontier, and the stakes are enormous. What are they after? Estimates suggest vast deposits of oil and natural gas are trapped in the seafloor sediments. Even more tantalizing are methane hydrates, frozen methane crystals that could represent an energy reserve larger than all known natural gas deposits combined. There might also be rare earth elements, gold, and even diamonds down there. As the ice melts, the race to claim these potential riches is only getting more intense. But getting to these resources is a monumental challenge. The water is cold enough to freeze equipment solid. The ice cover makes surface operations a nightmare. And can you imagine an oil spill in these waters? It would be an environmental catastrophe nearly impossible to clean up. The unique Arctic wildlife would be devastated, and the indigenous communities who depend on these pristine ecosystems would suffer irreparable harm. Beyond the resources, the Arctic seafloor is home to biological mysteries that could rewrite our understanding of life. Back in 2012, scientists exploring the Gakkel Ridge discovered something incredible: hydrothermal vents, but not like any they'd seen before. Instead of vibrant tube worms, they found fields of white bacterial mats, thriving on chemical energy from deep within the earth. These microbes might be modern relatives of some of the earliest life forms on our planet, which survived billions of years ago without sunlight or oxygen. And it's not just microbes. The Arctic is home to creatures with astonishing longevity. Glass sponges, for example, can live for thousands of years. They grow incredibly slowly, and their skeletons act like natural archives. Just like tree rings, they record ancient ocean temperatures, currents, and chemistry, giving us a window into past climates. Then there are cold seeps, where methane bubbles up from the seafloor, supporting entire ecosystems of tube worms, mussels, and crabs that have evolved to live in this strange, chemical-rich environment. Every time we explore one of these seeps, we find new species. The seafloor also tells stories of immense, ancient cataclysms. We've found evidence of enormous submarine landslides, like the Hinlopen slide off Svalbard, which moved a mind-boggling 1,300 cubic kilometers of sediment. What caused it? An earthquake? The destabilization of gas hydrates? We're not sure. But it raises a chilling question. Could it happen again? As climate change warms the Arctic waters, it's a real possibility. A massive landslide today could trigger a devastating tsunami. This underwater world is also a library of climate history. By drilling into the sediment, scientists can pull up cores that show layers of warm and cold periods, documenting the ebb and flow of Arctic ice over millions of years. We've found drop stones, rocks carried by ancient icebergs, that tell us where the ice traveled. These records show that the Arctic has been ice-free many times in the past. Studying these ancient warm periods helps us understand what an ice-free Arctic might look like in our future. The geological record warns us that when the planet warms quickly, sea levels can rise by meters per century, fast enough to threaten our coastal cities within our lifetimes. The seafloor is also scarred by the great ice ages. We can see massive grooves carved by glaciers and long tracks left by icebergs scouring the seabed. These scars help us reconstruct how extensive the ice was in the past. But there are still features we can't explain. Mysterious mounds, hundreds of meters across, dot the seafloor. They might have been formed by massive methane explosions or slow methane seepage. If it's the former, it's another warning about the instability of methane hydrates as the ocean warms. We've even found ancient, submerged landscapes. Underwater canyons reveal where rivers once flowed when sea levels were much lower. It's possible that Ice Age humans lived in these now drowned lands, meaning ancient archaeological sites could be lying in wait just beneath the waves. And speaking of history, the Arctic seafloor is a graveyard of shipwrecks, hundreds of them. Some are recent, but others date back to the Viking era or even earlier. The extreme cold preserves them perfectly. The Breadalbane, a ship lost in 1853, was found in 1980 sitting upright, looking almost ready to set sail again. Each wreck is a time capsule, a window into the past. But they are also graves, and exploring them raises complex ethical questions. Military wrecks like sunken nuclear submarines add another layer of danger, with risks of radiation leaks and unexploded weapons. As technology advances and the ice recedes, exploring the Arctic seafloor is becoming more feasible. But this brings us to a critical crossroad. Should we explore it? Should we exploit the resources we find? Or should we leave this final frontier undisturbed, a sanctuary for science and a refuge for its unique life? There are no easy answers. The potential wealth is great and the knowledge we could gain is priceless, but the environmental and cultural costs could be irreversible. Perhaps the greatest wisdom lies not in conquering the last mystery, but in knowing when to let it be. Sometimes the most valuable thing a mystery can offer is simply the wonder of its existence. Imagine a world transformed, a place changing faster than anywhere else on Earth. The changes happening there, melting ice, rising temperatures, and shifting ecosystems, are creating a new world that will be unrecognizable within our lifetimes. Understanding this isn't just an academic exercise, it's existential. The fate of the Arctic is tied to our own future, to our global climate, and to the kind of planet we are creating. Let's start with the most dramatic change: the disappearance of Arctic sea ice. Since we started tracking it with satellites in 1979, the amount of ice covering the Arctic Ocean in the summer has shrunk by about 40%. And the ice that's left is younger, thinner, and much more fragile. The really thick old ice that has survived for years. Over 90% of it is already gone. Scientists now predict we could see summers in the Arctic with no sea ice at all within just 1 or 2 decades. An ice-free Arctic Ocean would be a planetary shift unlike anything in human history. The consequences would ripple across the globe. Weather patterns would be altered, affecting farming and water supplies for billions of people. As the bright reflective ice vanishes, the dark ocean water will absorb more sunlight, dramatically speeding up global warming. And as land ice in Greenland melts, sea levels will rise, threatening coastal cities everywhere. This is all part of something called the Arctic amplification effect. It's a series of feedback loops that are putting the warming into overdrive. Less ice means more sunlight gets absorbed by the ocean. More absorption means more warming. More warming means even less ice. It's a vicious cycle, and it's not the only one. As the permanently frozen ground, or permafrost, thaws, it releases massive amounts of greenhouse gases. Less snow cover exposes darker land, which also absorbs more heat. It's a chain reaction and it's gaining speed. Then there's Greenland. Its massive ice sheet holds enough frozen water to raise global sea levels by about 7 meters if it all melted. While that would take centuries, Greenland is already a major contributor to sea level rise, and the rate of melting is accelerating. In a single year, 2019, Greenland lost over 530 billion tons of ice. That is enough to raise the global sea level by 1.5 millimeters in just 12 months. Scientists have discovered that this melting is happening in several ways at once. Rivers of meltwater form on the surface and drain down through the ice, lubricating the base of glaciers and causing them to slide faster into the ocean. Huge chunks of ice break off into the sea as icebergs. Each of these processes feeds the others, creating yet another dangerous feedback loop. Some researchers are now warning that Greenland might be approaching a tipping point, a threshold where the ice loss becomes self-sustaining and irreversible, no matter what we do about emissions. If we've passed that point, major sea level rise is no longer a question of if, but when. The Arctic's ecosystems are also being completely restructured. Species from the south are moving in. Trees are starting to grow on the tundra, and shrubs are spreading across landscapes that were treeless for thousands of years. This might sound good. More plants, right? But the reality is much more complex. This darker vegetation absorbs more heat than the reflective tundra, causing even more local warming. And as wildfires become more common in these new forests, they release huge amounts of carbon, turning what should be a carbon sink into a carbon source. The local wildlife is struggling to keep up. Polar bears, the icons of the Arctic, are facing starvation as the sea ice they use for hunting seals disappears from under their feet. Some are trying to adapt by eating bird eggs or even scavenging at garbage dumps, but it's not enough. Their populations are declining, and they may vanish from many areas within decades. Caribou herds are also in trouble, their populations swinging wildly as their food sources and migration routes are disrupted by the changing climate. For the indigenous peoples who have depended on these animals for millennia, this is a crisis that threatens their food supply and their entire culture. The human cost is immense. Indigenous communities built on permafrost are literally sinking as the ground turns to mud. Coastal villages are being washed into the sea by storm surges that are becoming more frequent and powerful in a warmer Arctic. Some communities are facing the heartbreaking choice of abandoning their ancestral lands and moving to safer ground. But where some see a crisis, others see opportunity. The melting ice is opening up new shipping routes. The Northwest Passage in North America and the Northern Sea Route along Russia could slash shipping times between Asia and Europe, saving time and money. But this comes with enormous risks. An oil spill in these icy waters would be nearly impossible to clean up. The noise from ships disrupts marine life, and the traffic introduces invasive species into this fragile environment. This new accessibility is also fueling a resource rush. Oil, gas, and mining companies are moving in to extract the Arctic's vast mineral wealth. Fishing fleets are pushing north into newly ice-free waters. This raises huge questions. Who owns these resources? How can we protect the rights of indigenous peoples? And should some of these pristine areas be off-limits to development altogether? The world's superpowers are taking notice. China has declared itself a near-Arctic state and is investing heavily in shipping, resources, and research. This has made traditional Arctic nations uneasy, raising the potential for conflict over territory and resources in a region that was once a symbol of peaceful cooperation. Looking ahead, climate models paint a stark picture. By the middle of this century, Arctic summers could be 5 to 10 degrees Celsius warmer than they were just a few decades ago. Vast areas of permafrost could thaw, and Greenland's melt could raise sea levels by centimeters every decade. We may see entirely new ecosystems emerge, with combinations of species that have never existed together before. In response, some scientists are proposing radical geoengineering ideas, from refreezing sea ice to covering glaciers with reflective blankets. But these ideas are controversial and expensive, and they only treat the symptoms, not the cause of the problem. For the indigenous peoples of the Arctic, this isn't a future problem. It's a crisis happening right now. Their traditional knowledge, built over thousands of years, is becoming less reliable as the world changes around them. Their languages and cultures are at risk as their communities are uprooted. Some indigenous leaders argue for a complete halt to development, while others believe change is inevitable and are fighting for a central role in managing it, ensuring that their communities benefit. The future Arctic will be more open, more accessible, and more contested than at any time in human history. Will it be better or worse? That depends on your perspective. For a shipping company, it's an opportunity. For a polar bear, it's a death sentence. For an indigenous community, it is a profound loss, but also a fight for a new future. Ultimately, the fate of the Arctic is being decided now, by our emissions, our policies, and our choices. We are running an uncontrolled experiment on a planetary scale, and the Arctic is showing us the results first. What we learn from this transformation may determine whether our own civilization can adapt to the changes we've set in motion. Even today, in our age of satellites and supercomputers, the Arctic still guards secrets. It's a land of breathtaking beauty, but also a realm of phenomena that defy easy explanation. Modern mysteries continue to emerge from the frozen north, challenging what we think we know and reminding us that some places on Earth still hold the power to surprise us. In 2014, Siberian reindeer herders stumbled upon something shocking. Massive craters, some over 50 meters across and 60 meters deep, that seemed to have appeared overnight. Scientists scrambled to investigate. Their leading theory? Explosive releases of methane gas. As the Arctic's permafrost thaws, methane trapped for millennia is released. If this gas builds up pressure under a frozen seal, it can rupture violently, blasting earth and ice into the air. This explanation makes sense, especially with elevated methane levels found near the craters. But it opens a Pandora's box of new questions. Could these explosions happen near towns or cities? And more chillingly, could they trigger a feedback loop, where each explosion thaws more permafrost, releasing more methane, causing more warming, and leading to even more explosions? These craters are just one part of a bigger, unsettling picture. The Arctic ground itself is alive, moving and changing in ways we're just beginning to understand. There are pingos, massive ice-cored mounds that can grow as tall as a 20-story building, only to collapse or even explode. Then there are thermokarst lakes, which can drain catastrophically in a matter of hours, leaving behind new sinkholes. Satellites show the ground across the Arctic is rising and falling in complex patterns. Some of it is predictable, but much of it is sudden and erratic. For the communities and infrastructure built on this supposedly permafrost, roads, pipelines, airports, this instability is a ticking time bomb. And it's not just the ground. For centuries, people have reported strange lights in the Arctic sky, things far weirder than the beautiful Aurora borealis. Witnesses describe glowing geometric patterns and structured lights that seem artificial. While many sightings can be explained away as rocket launches or atmospheric tricks, some reports are harder to dismiss. In 1984, airline pilots flying over the Kola Peninsula saw a colossal circular light in the clouds ahead. It was hundreds of meters across, rotating slowly with a pale glow. As they got closer, it just vanished. Similar stories from other Arctic pilots exist, describing these transient, luminous ovals. What are they? Some speculate they're caused by powerful radio transmitters interacting with the ionosphere, like the ones used in scientific experiments. But whether that explains everything remains a topic of intense debate. Then there are the sounds. From deep within the ice and sea come mysterious hums, booms, and metallic groans that have puzzled researchers for years. In 2016, residents of Igloolik, Nunavut, reported a strange pinging or beeping noise coming from the seafloor. The sound was so persistent that it seemed to be driving away wildlife. The Canadian military investigated but found nothing. Was it secret mineral exploration? A submarine? No one knows. The sounds of the Arctic are a constant reminder of the immense, unseen forces at play, from the groaning stress of shifting ice sheets to geological tremors we can't yet predict. The animals are acting strangely too. Indigenous communities, whose knowledge of the land runs generations deep, report that wildlife behavior has become unpredictable. This is partly due to climate change disrupting ancient patterns, but sometimes their actions seem to point to something else entirely, something our instruments can't detect. Mass strandings of whales, birds abandoning nesting sites for no apparent reason. It is as if they are responding to subtle shifts in the environment that we are completely blind to. It makes you wonder what variables we're missing, what forces the animals can sense that we can't. This naturally leads to the question, could unknown species still exist in the Arctic? It sounds like fantasy, but history tells us to be cautious. The megamouth shark was completely unknown to science until 1976. New species of deer and monkeys have been discovered in just the last few decades. The Arctic, especially its deep oceans and remote interiors, is one of the least explored places on Earth. While the discovery of a large, unknown land animal is unlikely, it's not impossible. The Arctic has surprised us before, and it will surprise us again. Electronic equipment also seems to go haywire more often in the Arctic. This is partly due to its proximity to the magnetic pole and space weather. But some reports describe anomalies that defy standard explanations. Localized zones where multiple independent systems all fail at once, or strange interference patterns with no known source. The Arctic's geology is complex, with vast magnetic mineral deposits and ancient impact craters that could create bizarre local magnetic fields we haven't mapped yet. We simply don't have the complete picture. Perhaps the greatest mystery is what we don't see. The Arctic is so vast and isolated that countless events could happen without anyone ever knowing. An unusual phenomenon in a remote valley with no satellites overhead and no sensors on the ground would simply vanish into history. This is changing with technology, but it also means we can't easily dismiss historical accounts of strange events. The evidence may be gone, but that doesn't mean it never happened. Modern technology is a double-edged sword. It solves old mysteries, but also reveals new ones. High-resolution satellite images show us strange geometric formations on the ground and ice sheets changing faster than any model predicted. At the same time, citizen scientists, birdwatchers, photographers, and local residents are becoming a vital network of observers, catching events that professionals might miss. In the end, the Arctic's enduring mystery might be its greatest gift. It's a place that resists our attempts to catalog and control everything. It's too big, too harsh, and too dynamic to ever be fully known. For every question we answer, two more seem to appear. And maybe that's how it should be. The Arctic reminds us to be humble, to stand in awe of forces we don't fully understand. That isn't a failure of science, it's wisdom. We've journeyed through the Arctic's greatest mysteries. We've chased the ghosts of vanished expeditions and searched for phantom islands on century-old maps. We've marveled at strange phenomena and confronted an uncertain future. We have explored scientific puzzles and human tragedies, biological wonders and geopolitical tensions. But after all this, perhaps the greatest mystery of all is what the Arctic truly means. What does it represent in our collective human consciousness, and why are we so irresistibly drawn to this frozen frontier, despite all its dangers and hardships? Throughout history, the Arctic has been humanity's edge, the very boundary between the known and the unknown, the familiar and the alien, the survivable and the fatal. It's the place where civilization gives way to raw wilderness, where our most advanced technology confronts its absolute limits, and where human ambition meets the cold, indifferent force of nature. And we humans, we're drawn to edges. We are drawn to boundaries, to the places that test our limits and force us to question everything we thought we knew. The Arctic is the ultimate such place. On early maps, cartographers labeled this vast white expanse terra incognita, the unknown land. This wasn't just a literal description of an unexplored region, it was a metaphor. It represented everything we didn't know, everything uncertain, everything beyond our control. As explorers pushed northward, charting coastlines and mapping islands, the literal terra incognita began to shrink. But the metaphorical meaning, that powerful idea of a final frontier, persists. Even today, the Arctic remains a place where we confront what we don't know, what we can't predict, and what we ultimately cannot control. Think about the expeditions we've discussed. Franklin's doomed search for the Northwest Passage, André's tragic balloon journey to the North Pole, and the countless others who ventured into the ice. Their motivations were a complex mix: national pride and the race for glory, certainly played a role. Scientific curiosity was a powerful driver. Economic interests, the dream of new trade routes and resources, shaped many of these voyages. But beneath all these practical reasons lay something deeper, something fundamental to our species. The primal need to explore, to push boundaries, to venture into the unknown simply because it is there. This powerful drive has led to humanity's greatest achievements, but it has also led to our most heartbreaking failures, and the Arctic has claimed so many lives. We've talked about some of the casualties: Franklin's 129 men, Andre's 3-man crew, and others lost in shipwrecks, accidents, and disasters. But the total death toll from Arctic exploration is impossible to calculate. How many unnamed sailors died on those early brutal voyages? How many indigenous people perished from diseases brought by explorers? How many adventurers simply vanished into the white wilderness, leaving no record behind but their absence? Each one of these deaths is a personal tragedy, a story of families devastated, potential unfulfilled, and lives cut short. But taken together, they also say something profound about the human condition, that we are willing to risk everything for knowledge, for glory, for the simple, profound satisfaction of having been somewhere difficult. Is this noble or is it foolish? Perhaps it's both. Perhaps that very contradiction is what makes us human. The Arctic's mysteries aren't just puzzles waiting to be solved. They are an essential part of what makes the Arctic so meaningful. The vanished colonies, the unexplained phenomena, the questions that still have no answers. These are what give the Arctic its depth, its complexity, and its significance beyond mere geography. We value the Arctic in part precisely because it remains mysterious, because it resists our attempts to completely understand and categorize it. But climate change is now transforming the very nature of Arctic mystery. As the ice melts and access to the region improves, the Arctic is becoming less remote, less unknown, less mysterious. Satellites can now reveal features that were once hidden beneath meters of ice. Warming temperatures are making regions accessible that were previously unreachable. Technologies like autonomous drones and submersibles can explore areas far too dangerous for humans. The Arctic is being known, mapped, measured, and understood in ways that would have been unimaginable just a few decades ago. Is this a loss or is it a gain? On one hand, we are gaining incredible knowledge. We're understanding fragile ecosystems, discovering new species, and learning vital information about our planet's climate and geology. But on the other hand, we are losing mystery. We are losing that sense of vastness, of unknown territories, of a frontier that truly challenges us. Perhaps we are losing something essential about the Arctic's meaning, transforming it from an eternal frontier into just another place we've studied, catalogued, and filed away. But the Arctic has a way of resisting simplification. Even as we map every island and chart every current, it retains its power to surprise. The giant craters suddenly appearing in the Siberian permafrost, the unexpected and rapid changes in ice dynamics, the mysterious sounds and lights that still defy easy explanation. These are powerful reminders that our knowledge is incomplete. They remind us that the Arctic has not been fully tamed, that nature retains its own agency and the ability to completely confound our expectations. It is also crucial to remember that the indigenous peoples of the Arctic have never seen their home as mysterious in the way outsiders do. For them, the Arctic is not an unknown land, it is home. It is a world known intimately through millennia of experience, understood through a deep well of accumulated knowledge passed down through generations, and navigated with a confidence that outsiders can only dream of. The Arctic's mysteries are largely a Western construction, a reflection of our own ignorance, rather than the Arctic's inherent nature. This perspective is absolutely vital. What seems mysterious and baffling from the outside may be perfectly comprehensible from within. Indigenous knowledge offers insights that Western science is only now beginning to appreciate and incorporate. Oral traditions, once dismissed as myths, preserve remarkably accurate observations of history and the environment. Traditional place names encode detailed environmental information, and ancient survival practices reflect a sophisticated, holistic understanding of ecology and climate. As the Arctic transforms, indigenous peoples face not mystery but tragedy. They are losing not just their environment, but their cultures, their languages, and their very ways of life. For them, the Arctic's transformation isn't an academic question, it's an existential crisis. And they have been trying to warn the rest of the world for decades, telling us that what happens in the Arctic does not stay in the Arctic. They've been trying to tell us that we are all connected to this frozen frontier, no matter where on Earth we live. The Arctic's future mysteries will be different from those of its past. We won't be wondering about phantom islands or whether the Northwest Passage exists. Those questions have been answered. Instead, we will face new, more urgent mysteries. How rapidly will the ice continue to melt? What irreversible tipping points might we trigger? How will entire ecosystems reorganize themselves? Can species adapt fast enough to survive? What new geopolitical conflicts will emerge as the ice recedes? And the most fundamental question of all, can our civilization navigate the profound changes that we ourselves have initiated? These aren't mysteries in the classical sense. They are profound uncertainties about incredibly complex systems, where the outcomes depend on countless interacting factors and simply cannot be predicted with confidence. But they are mysteries nonetheless, and they are arguably far more consequential than the historical puzzles we've explored. The fate of Franklin's men mattered deeply to their families and their nation, but it didn't affect the course of global civilization. The fate of Arctic ice affects every single one of us. Perhaps the ultimate Arctic mystery is this: what does the Arctic tell us about ourselves? It is a mirror, reflecting our own human nature back at us, our courage and our foolishness, our ingenuity and our hubris, our infinite capacity for wonder and our terrifying capacity for destruction. Every abandoned expedition is a reminder that nature is ultimately more powerful than our technology. Every mysterious phenomenon reminds us that our knowledge is forever incomplete. Every species struggling to adapt reminds us that our actions have consequences, and every single melting glacier reminds us that we are conducting a dangerous, uncontrolled experiment on our one and only planet with completely uncertain outcomes. The Arctic has always been a place of extremes: extreme cold, extreme isolation, extreme beauty, and extreme danger. It demands extreme respect. Those who approach the Arctic with arrogance and hubris tend to meet tragic ends. Those who approach with humility, with preparation, and with a deep respect for its power are the ones more likely to survive and even thrive. This isn't just a lesson for polar explorers, it's a lesson for all of humanity about our relationship with our planet. As we close this exploration of Arctic mysteries, we are left with a final lingering question. How do we honor the Arctic? How do we respect a place that has challenged, killed, and inspired humanity for centuries? How do we balance our intense curiosity, our desire to know, to explore, to understand, with our profound responsibility to protect what makes the Arctic so special? Perhaps honoring the Arctic means accepting that not all mysteries need to be solved. Perhaps it means allowing some questions to remain unanswered and some frontiers to remain frontiers. Perhaps it means truly listening to the voices of those who have lived in the Arctic for millennia, rather than assuming that outside expertise is always superior. And perhaps it means recognizing that the Arctic does not exist solely for our benefit, that it has an intrinsic value far beyond any resources we can extract or knowledge we can gain from it. The Arctic will remain a mystery, not because we lack the technology or the intelligence to understand it, but because it is fundamentally wild, fundamentally beyond our complete control. And that is a good thing. We need places in this world that remind us we are not the masters of the earth. We need places that remind us of our own smallness in the face of geological time. Places that inspire awe and humility. The Arctic serves that vital role. May it always do so. The eternal frontier remains eternal not because it is unchanging. We have seen just how rapidly it is transforming, but because it eternally challenges us, eternally teaches us, and eternally reminds us of what truly matters. The Arctic's greatest mystery isn't about vanished explorers or strange lights in the sky. It's about whether we as a species can finally learn the lessons the Arctic is so desperately trying to teach us before it's too late. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the mysteries of the Arctic. If you've enjoyed this series, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next adventure.